Good morning. We will call to order the February 4th, 2014 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. At this time, I'd like to ask Jeff Smith, the Indian River County Clerk of the Circuit Court, to lead us in the invocation. And please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Dylan Reingold, the County Attorney. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. Let us pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity this morning to meet as citizens of this county and to do the business that you have for us to do. Lord, just be with these gentlemen as they make decisions that affect all of us. And Lord, we just ask for your wisdom and your strength in what they are to deal with. And Lord, we just ask for those that are serving in the military, wherever they're at around the world, that you provide a hedge of protection around them and you bring them back home to us safely. These things we pray in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Please face the flag and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. Gentlemen, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I have one on behalf of a member of the public that's here that had a little confusion in filling out the public speaking form deadline. They have the form, they're filling it out, but it's Susan Meal that would like to know if she could make a public presentation or statement on some issue. I don't know what the actual issue is, but I was speaking with her this morning and there was some confusion in the process that she needed to follow.
Gentlemen, is there concurrence or?
I have no problem with speaking, but I'd like to know what the issue is before we.
Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council.
Okay. Yeah, I have no problem with that.
None whatsoever, sir.
Okay, so we will add Ms. Meehill under 10B2.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Fletcher.
I spoke with Dr. David Cox, and he has respectfully requested that his name be removed from consideration for consent item 8G Golf.
Okay.
Since we have more than one, we need to pull that.
It will probably be pulled,
Yes,
so we can discuss it at that time. Okay. Thank you.
Inform you before we move forward.
Thank you. Any other additions or deletions to the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to presentations and proclamations. First up is a presentation by John O'Connor on the Tour de Vero event sponsored by Indian River Firefighters Benevolent Association in honor of Fire Chief Brian Nolan. John, welcome. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. I just want to say, John O'Connor, President of the Indian River Firefighters Benevolent Association. I want to thank the board and staff for giving me the moment to address you this morning. I'm here on behalf of the Tour de Vero, which will be held on Sunday, February 9th, in honor of fallen Fire Chief Brian Nolan and fellow cyclist Keith Gergley. The start-finish will be located at Carrabba's Italian Grill, and it leaves promptly at 7:15 a.m. The price to participate is $45, and there's 3 different distances if you guys want to join, 40, 60, and 88 miles.
What about the 5 mile?
or just the Moral Support Club.
Can we just be there and go, 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 go?
Absolutely. 7:15, you can come and send us off.
And you enter a truck.
All participants will receive a meal from Carrabba's Italian Grill. I would like to thank Indian River County Sheriff Darrell Lohr and Jeff Luther for assisting in keeping us safe on the roads on Sunday. All proceeds will benefit the Indian River Firefighters Benevolent Association, which is a 501c3. Indian River Firefighters Benevolent Association has given out a total of $20,000 to various nonprofits since its established in 2012. The Benevolent also raises funds from firefighter tags, which are purchased by residents in Indian River County. And this is a sample of the actual plate that if anybody buys in Indian River County, we get the funds and we are able to give those back to the residents. The Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, and the Sheriff's Explorers, as well as the Indian River Soccer Association, will be volunteering their time and support stations along the course. I would like to invite all of you to help us send this off at 7:15 that morning. And in addition to the Tour de Vero, we will also be assisting with the St. Baldrick's Foundation fundraiser on March 1st. So, and I also have some T-shirts for you if we could get a picture. That'd be great.
John, just again, the date and the location for people listening?
It is February 9th at Carrabba's Italian Grill. It's going to be a great event. We're going to have room for all the exhibitors in the parking lot, and we have cyclists coming in from Melbourne and all the way up from Jensen. So people are going to be staying in the hotel rooms. They're going to be spending money. It's going to be a wonderful event.
Great. Thank you for all you guys do for the community, not just this event, but you all do a lot of things for the community that kind of go unseen or unrecognized, and just want to publicly tell you that we appreciate all the effort you all do for the community. Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you want to come on up and we'll get a picture?
Absolutely.
Small.
Yeah, he asked me. I said, well, vanity says a large, but reality says an extra. Extra large.
Just that? Yeah, I got a pair of spandex shorts that match these.
Yeah, that's nice.
It'll be worth it to take that picture.
Aren't they all extra larges, John?
Yeah, I think I
Boys
got
large.
double X. I was the honest one.
No, I was honest. I told him. Well, we can go alternate.
I don't know. Actually, the outburst is the...
Sometimes I'm a medium.
More fun stuff on the back.
But I want to know how they get that picture.
You can have another 2X.
How'd they get that picture? How'd you guys get the picture?
You're upsizing already?
John?
Yeah, there you go.
You see that? How'd they get that picture of me on the back here?
Here you go. Notice I'm looking, yeah. But see, this is me right here in front of the pack.
Commissioner Davis always at the front of the peloton.
There you go. Good answer, Billy. Good answer.
This side of
Make sure that's right.
You got someone take a picture,
Where's your
John?
photo guy? Scott.
You want to come on up?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on up here.
What are we doing, the front or the back, gentlemen?
Well, we can kind of alternate. Yeah, that looks good.
The back looks great because it's got
The back's got a lot of...
There you go. Perfect.
One over here right in the middle.
It's got you on there, right?
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, here we go. All right, one here. We got to switch.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, John. Good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sunday at 7:15.
7:15.
They serve breakfast, huh?
I heard everybody got a meal at Carrabba's.
I hope not before.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I could keep it anybody.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Next is a presentation by Elizabeth Graves Bass, President of Board of Directors of Vero Heritage, Inc. on local history, and telling us about a fundraising event for the Heritage Center, Indian River Citrus Museum. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm Elizabeth Graves Bass. Also, I have with me Janie Gould, almost said the other Janie I know. Janie Gould is here to help me. She's working on this event. We're very excited about the event that's coming up. What we're doing, you know, a book is just a book unless you know its story, right? It means nothing to you unless you read its story and you learn it and you know something about it. Well, a building like those that are up there is just a building unless you know something about it. The house you grew up in means something to you because you have its memories, you have its stories. The elementary school where you went when you think about being in 5th grade and what the room looked like. It's the building, it's the place that has the story to tell. So what we're doing, we try every year at Vero Heritage to do an event that highlights some of the history, makes it come alive in our county, to give people a sense of place. We have so many people who did not grow up here. We have a lot who did, which every time I tell someone I was born here, it's just like, I didn't know anybody was ever born here. Yeah, they were, and they're still being born here. But what we're trying to do is to establish the importance of history and why we should value these buildings who give us this sense of place, a sense of belonging and the history within them. We're naming our event. It's going to be on, you want to show the flyer? Do you have this? Yeah. I'm going to give you each one of these. I don't have a shirt for you. I did not supposed to bring you a shirt. Sorry. We are going to have this March 13th, this event for a $10 admission, and it's going to be a walk through the county. We're going to start in Fellsmere. We'll go to Roseland, Sebastian, take a little jog over to the Island, Orchid, back to Wabasso, Gifford, and Vero, and end up in Oslo. And in each of these communities, we're going to have a place, a building, and that building is going to talk to you. That's what we're calling the event, If These Walls Could Talk. We want these buildings to talk to you, to tell you. We're going to have people at each table, where the building is going to be represented with a big banner. But we're going to have people there who are going to flesh this building out and tell you its story and its importance. Janie has been going around to interviewing people who are in these buildings. You can show us a building. Want another slide? So she can tell you a little bit now, because she's been making these walls talk, because that's the name of our event, If These Walls Could Talk. And Janie's been trying to make these walls talk.
Let's see, on the other image, if you would, there is a cottage in Riamar at 855 Riamar Drive, and that's going to be part of our display. The lady who lives in it has lived in it since the 1940s, since the early 1940s, and it still doesn't have air conditioning, so she doesn't stay in the summer. But she's going to come and she's going to talk about things that she remembers in Riamar. She remembers the Iceman, for example, who came I guess when the ice melted and they needed more ice. But she's got great stories, and she's going to be with us that night. The Orchid School, and that's on the other one too.
It's on the other side.
Yeah. Well, I don't see it, but anyway, Mrs. Beverly Graves was one of the first students at the Orchid School, and she was there when she was 5 years old. She hopes to be with us that night. She's got great stories about the school. She remembers it well. Walking there and playing with the other kids. It was 8 grades under one roof, 14 kids, one teacher, one long-suffering teacher, I'm sure. But she's got great stories about that. The Citrus Bank, Indian River Citrus Bank. Some of us who grew up here remember when that was the only bank in town, the only commercial bank. Salida Arden's father, Mr. Hatfield, Warren Hatfield, worked there from the early 1940s until he retired, and 43 years later. Salida has great stories about the bank. She remembers when it was open on Saturday, and it was kind of a community meeting place. Anyway, we're going to have people connected with all the buildings at this event to talk, to answer questions, share memories. They'll have photos. The Macedonia Baptist Church, which was moved, it was the oldest African-American church in the region. It was moved from Sebastian to Gifford a number of years ago, and a lady who's involved in its restoration is going to be there to talk. So anyway, we hope you all will come and support us that night. It's going to be a fun time, and looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Yeah. So you were just going to drive from place to place?
Nope, we're going to walk in the building.
It's all
Station set up.
Okay.
Set up so you can take a tour without leaving the building.
Okay. All right.
We're calling it a virtual tour, all under one roof. So, the roof of the Heritage Center.
All right.
From 5 until 8 that night. So come and we'll have a good time. Thank you.
Super. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much
Thank
for
you.
your efforts to
I
preserve
have some
history.
extra flyers. If any of you would like to give them out, I would be more than glad.
Could we
And feel
put this
free to
on the
make
website?
copies.
Well, we could post this on our website, too,
Oh,
as an
that'd be
event.
wonderful.
Scott will do that. Scott will post
That'd be
it.
wonderful. That's part of our mission at Bureau Heritage. It's not just a place to have a wedding reception.
Yeah.
It's preserving the history of our county.
great.
It's important.
Yep.
This is
Thank
great.
you.
If you could give Scott a copy, he says he'll post it.
We'll get one.
If you do have more of them, we can put some of them where...
Out in the lobby?
Yeah.
The front
Yeah.
reception table?
Yeah, we'll put them out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That takes us to the approval of minutes of December 17, 2013, and January 7, 2014.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Zork. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Informational items. I guess the only thing on item B, the Code Enforcement Board, there was a request from one of the members to, well, first of all, Keith Hedin has resigned from the Code Enforcement Board. I'd like to publicly thank Keith for all his years of public service and wish him the best in his future endeavors. But there was a recommendation from one of the, I guess, the members that Mr. Tony Gervasio is a member-at-large representative, and he suggested changing his status as the businessman representative, which is what Mr. Hedin filled, and therefore free up a member-at-large slot, which would be easier to fill potentially from the general public. And Dylan, do we need, I mean, should the Code Enforcement Board give us a more formal recommendation for this, or is it something we can take up?
To the chair, I just want to let you know what my initial thought on this was, is that we would advertise for that position to see if we got any responses, and then if we had a problem, we'd bring it back. But if you would like to take an affirmative different direction, well, I'd be happy to listen to that.
Okay. Is there any consensus on the board, or just...
No, I agree with
I have no challenge with that. It probably gives a wider opportunity for applicants to come forward as the at-large position.
As an at-large position?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Davis?
I'm good.
Commissioner Zorg?
I'm good.
Commissioner Sly?
Fine.
Okay. So I guess we just need then a motion to approve Mr. Gervasio to be the
So moved.
businessman
Second.
representative.
Yep.
And that we will advertise for a member at large. And that, Commissioner Davis was the motion, and
Myself.
I believe Commissioner Fletcher was second.
Commissioner Fletcher. Okay. All right, any further discussion? Any comment? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. That takes care of that. Consent agenda. Gentlemen, is there anything
You go.
else to be pulled? Okay, item G. Is there any other items to be pulled?
Move approval?
I think
Right. Next, we go to the public. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to have a consent item pulled for additional discussion?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Althea McKenzie, 2405 16th Avenue. I'd like to pull item K.
Item K. Okay, thank you. Is that, okay, thank you, Ms. McKenzie. Is there any other members of the public that wish to have a consent item pulled for further discussion? So we have item G and K pulled. Gentlemen?
Approval?
as amended.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Fletcher, second from Commissioner Davis to approve consent as amended. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Could you please come up to the podium? Could you please come up to the podium and give your name and address for the record, please?
Morning.
Good morning.
My name's Ralph Goldman, and my question is, I'm interested in the discussion about the dog situation, where they're going to be kept, etc., and I don't know how to identify this on the agenda, so I want to make sure that I can address that issue just rather than passing over. Is that on the agenda
no,
for
that's the
today?
city of Vero Beach. I think the dog issues, the dog park in the city of Vero Beach.
Right.
That we have nothing to do with that. That's the city of Vero Beach.
Where is that meeting?
You know where City Hall is on, it's on
20th.
westbound State Road 60?
You know where the old library is?
I was there this morning. The City Hall on 20th and 18th Street?
Yes. Mhm.
They said they had no meeting there to come here.
Okay, well, they meet every other Tuesday.
Well, it was in the paper that they're meeting this morning at 9:30.
Yeah, that's what
They
I
are. They are.
They are.
But where?
In City
Let
Hall.
me have someone...
Dylan's pulling up on his...
Yeah, because I was there this morning and they said there's no such meeting.
Is it a park and recreation meeting?
10th Avenue.
10th Avenue, yeah, that's right.
Oh, it's at 10th Avenue.
Yes.
10th Avenue and 60th.
10th Avenue and 60th.
60, Route 60.
Can we get a hold of one of the ladies up in
Can
the office?
someone give me the address?
Yes, we're doing that right now.
Thank you.
Here,
If you just want to go ahead and just have a seat, as soon as we get that answer, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
At the website.
yeah.
And Joe, could you ask one of the girls in the office to verify that too, please? Thank you. So, sir, as soon as we get the answer, we'll be glad to get that to you, okay? Thank you. Item G was pulled, and Commissioner Solari?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have had a couple letters from members of the South Beach Property Owners Association who are very interested in the Beach and Shores Commission, and the South Beach Property Owners Association got together and recommended Francisco J. San Miguel. And as I understand it, the South Beach Property Owners Association has had somebody on the board for a reasonable amount of time, and they've shown over the years to be very interested in beach preservation. So I'm going to move Mr. San Miguel for the position.
Okay, and just under that discussion, we have a motion from Commissioner Solari, seconded from Commissioner Flesher. Commissioner Flesher, you did report that Mr. David Cox was withdrawing his application.
He withdrew his name from consideration on the state.
That in the record. Okay, thank you. We have a motion for Mr. Sam Miguel. Is there any other nominations or discussion on the floor? Okay, seeing none. Is there any comment from the public? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously with Mr. Sam Miguel to be the Beach and Shore appointee. Ms. McKenzie, you asked to have item K pulled. And this is the approval of a bid award for the Indian River Boulevard resurfacing project from US 1 to 17th Street. Good morning, Ms. McKenzie.
Good morning again. I just had a couple of questions. I understand that the bid is already in place, and this is just basically a contract between Ranger and the county to do this particular project. But I was reading the documents attached to this, and it says the Florida Department of Transportation will be reimbursing the county with a small county outreach program grant. And my question was, is this for secondary roads? I take it it's not for county roads?
Yes, Chris Moore, Public Works Director. They are used for more major roads in the county. Basically, DOT allows us to use these grant fundings, like the Small County Outreach Program, to partially fund these resurfacing projects, but they've got to be more major roadways.
So is this particular Small County Outreach Program grant available for other parts of the county? Or is it just this Indian River Boulevard?
Well, it's available for major roads in the county, typically not used for local roads. DOT likes to fund these roadways that carry a lot of traffic. It doesn't have to be a state roadway, it can be a county roadway, but it's typically a arterial or collector roadway, not a local.
Okay, because I was just going to ask, was there no other opportunity to identify other roads in the county? Because Indian River Boulevard, if I recollect, has been paved quite a bit in the last 10 years. And so we're going to resurface that road because it has potholes, or it has a need for this, or?
Yes, what we do is every year we evaluate all of our roadways, all 404 miles of centerline miles of paved roadways in the county, and we rank those 1 to 5. Those roads that are beginning to fail, such as Indian River Boulevard. Indian River Boulevard is pushing over 20 years old, and there's some sections that carry 30,000 vehicles per day. Local roads carry maybe 1,000 vehicles per day, but Indian River Boulevard carries probably 30,000 vehicles a day. And because of that, the base and the sub-base start to fail after a given amount of time. We'll start to see cracking in the asphalt riding surface, alligator cracking, and it'll start to heave and shift. And as we see those, it'll receive a worse ranking. And then we know we've got to get in there and resurface it before it gets so bad that we'd have to replace the whole road. What we do is we go over these collector and arterial roadways, the surface conditions with DOT, and then they decide which ones they'll allocate that grant funding for.
Okay. And was this the only road that was presented to DOT at the time?
No, we looked at a lot of roads. There are several sections of roadways that are getting bad. North 66th Avenue is one. The section north of 49th, where we're not widening, is getting in rough shape. So are parts of 58th Avenue. But since 66, we're going to be working on that in the near future. Indian River Boulevard, we're not. So we knew that Indian River Boulevard was a good candidate to use these SCOP grants for.
Okay, because my recollection is that Indian River Boulevard was resurfaced a few years ago, and then the street lights were added. And if you have documents that we could look at or that I could see, and then once that resurfacing was done, then drainage was put in, then it was resurfaced again, and then it's getting resurfaced again in less than 5 years. Because I live in that area, I actually see the work that's being done. What I'd like to find out more about also, if you'll be able to help me, Mr. Moore, is this small county outreach program grant available for 45th Street? Because there's been some discussion that funding is not available. And 45th Street is a county road, and it is an arterial for a lot of traffic that travels through to get access to 60. So as we continue to discuss monies that are available, I'm hoping that this will also become part of what will be available to help us improve 45th Street.
Right. We can look at those, but you got to remember, Indian River Boulevard's been resurfaced in different sections. The last section was to the north, and we also added street lights a few years ago on that section. This is the section to the south, between 4th Street, where it joins US 1, and 17th. And that has not been resurfaced in a while. So, but we can get you that schedule of when we've resurfaced the different sections of Indian River Boulevard, and also look at some of the other collector and arterial roadways, such as 45th.
Okay, and then my second question is, the estimated cost for this project is $1.1 million, and the work that is being done by Ranger is $686,000, and the county will be putting in $171,000. There's a difference of $127,000. Is that your fees as the engineer, since you're heading up this project?
No, there's no fees in here. This is all reconstruction money. I think what happened is Ranger's bid, which is shown on page 101, they were the low bidder at $716,499.50. Then it was reduced somewhat. We're going to do some of those items that are in the contract in-house. I know traffic engineering is going to purchase some of the traffic signal sensors in-house. We remove them from the contract, which decreases the total bid award from $716,000 to $686,000, and then our share would be 75% of that would be paid by DOT under the SCOP grant funding, and 25% by the county. I hope I've answered your question, but it's...
So the engineer's estimate, which is almost $130,000 more, was just a padding or something?
No. Before we present this work to DOT and before we bid it, we have to provide an engineer's estimate.
Okay.
So we'll look at all of the line items that are included, the asphalt, traffic items, striping, anything like that, and we'll put a line item amount for each of those items based on past projects that we've done. In this case, it was good because the bids came in much lower, substantially lower, over 20% lower than that engineer's estimate. Sometimes the engineer's estimate is high based on our experience, sometimes it's lower. In this case, it was higher, and the bidders actually came in low. We don't control the bid amounts. They can bid whatever they like. But in this case, it was actually good because they lowered the amount, which lowers the amount of DOT's share and lowers the amount of the county share.
Okay, thank you, that was it.
Althea, again, to clarify, this came back to us first in August of last year. And so when staff brings it forward to get approval to move forward with the grant, they have to give us a number just so we know what we're getting into. So that estimate was a little high. Our original cost share was $271,000 because the bids came in lower. The actual budget amount is now down to $171,000. But that's just their estimate number when they first bring it to us to get permission for us to say, yes, go ahead with the project. And in this case, it worked out good because it was lower than the estimate.
So when you present this back to FDOT, it's actual real numbers, it's not your estimate?
That's correct.
And then you only get reimbursed for real numbers, and the county is not getting additional funds for being the engineer for this?
No, it's real dollars and
Real work.
real work.
All right, thank you.
Okay? Thank you. Gentlemen, is there a motion to approve item K?
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fletcher, seconded from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Gentlemen, thank you. That takes care of the consent agenda. There was no constitutional officer items. That then takes us now to public hearings. The first item is Grand Harbor Community Association, Inc. and Grand Harbor Vero Beach Development, LLC's request for a comprehensive plan future land use map amendment to redesignate plus or minus 8.3 acres from CI to M1 and to rezone those plus or minus 8.3 acres from CG to RM6 and to simultaneously redesignate plus or minus 8.3 acres from M1 to CI and to rezone those plus or minus 8.3 acres from RM6 to CG. This memorandum is dated January 20th, 2014. And while the agenda does list this as a quasi-judicial hearing, that the county attorney has given me his opinion that since this is just our transmittal public hearing and we are not adopting any of these zoning changes or the land use change, we're simply going to vote whether it's transmitted or not, that this does not qualify as quasi-judicial. It will be quasi-judicial when it comes back before us for the final adoption hearing. Is that correct, Dylan?
Yes, that is generally correct. What you have before you today, although the agenda item discusses the rezoning, all you really have before you today is the decision whether to transmit the comprehensive plan amendment, and therefore that item itself is legislative in nature, and staff was merely just trying to educate the public and this board as to the potential rezoning that would be coming on the back side of this item when it returns for adoption. So therefore, it is merely just a legislative item. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair and to Stan Bowling.
Thank you. Stan, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Stan Bowling, Community Development Director. As you all just discussed, the matter before you this morning is the land use designation amendment, which is legislative. Grand Harbor has filed along with that a rezoning request, which is discussed in staff's report. And just a bit of context, the county's comprehensive plan was approved in 1990 and revised in 1998 and 2010 pretty comprehensively based on an evaluation and appraisal report. But there are amendment windows for applicants with amendment requests that are not considered small scale, such as the subject one, in January, April, July, and October. And this amendment that's before you all this morning was submitted in the October 2013 window. It was the only amendment submitted in that particular window. And the general process that the amendment has gone through, and all amendments go through, is submittal to staff and staff review, then a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then a transmittal hearing, which is what you all are involved in and conducting this morning. If you all decide that the amendment request warrants transmittal, it is transmitted to the state and regional agencies. They make their comments, and then we have an adoption hearing before the Board of County Commissioners, and that's the hearing where the rezoning, parallel rezoning request would come into play as well. And then if it's adopted, it's transmitted to the state and the other reviewing agencies, and that would conclude the process. I will tell you that this is a public hearing process, and staff has provided notice to surrounding property owners and advertised, but to this point we've had no input or comments from members of the public on this particular request. The Planning and Zoning Commission held their public meeting last December and recommended unanimously that you all approve the request that's before you. The request involves two properties owned by Grand Harbor in the area of the Grand Harbor development. Subject property 1 is located at the southeast corner of 53rd Street and Indian River Boulevard. It's approximately 8.34 acres. The subject property number 2, also owned by Grand Harbor, is located south of Grand Harbor Boulevard on the west side of Indian River Boulevard, same acreage as subject property 1. This is the existing zoning or land use map for those properties, and essentially the property number 1 up by 53rd Street is designated medium density residential, and the property to the south is designated commercial industrial. And what is proposed is essentially swap those two land use designations. So property 1 up by 53rd Street would become part of the commercial industrial node, and the property to the south, subject property 2, would become residential. And with the rezoning request that parallels, the zoning districts would be swapped as well. The multifamily zoning that's in subject property 1 would go to CG, and the CG that's on subject property 2 would go to multifamily. The criteria that are analyzed with this request was concurrency on public facilities, compatibility with the surrounding area, impact on environmental quality, and consistency with the comprehensive plan. Regarding concurrency, since there's no increase in intensity, there's a land use swap, the density intensity stays the same. It's impacting the same facilities because the two properties are located close together. So no concurrency test is required at this point in time. There will be concurrency tests with any development plans that go in the future. Regarding compatibility, subject property number 1 is located along Indian River Boulevard and 53rd Street. It's right across from other commercial zoning. Grand Harbor owns the residential property that surrounds this particular property on the north and the east and the south. And this particular property that would be redesignated, rezoned if you all approve it, is almost 400 feet from the nearest residential unit, and Grand Harbor again owns the properties that are in between. For subject property 2, down by the falls at Grand Harbor, this particular property is surrounded by parts of the Grand Harbor development and residential development. So in essence, right now, it's commercial sitting in the middle of residential area. So staff believes that the request would be compatible. Regarding environmental impact, staff's conclusion is that there would be no difference in impacts whether the properties are developed for residential or for commercial, so there's no special impacts to look at there. Regarding the comprehensive plan, there are criteria that have to be satisfied for an amendment to be essentially be qualified for your approval. In this case, one of those criteria is for a swap or reconfiguration such as what is proposed. So the request is warranted and is consistent with the comprehensive plan with respect to an amendment. Staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the Board approve the future land use amendment for transmittal to the state and the regional agencies by approving the resolution that's attached in your meeting backup. I'd be glad to answer questions you might have.
Thank you, Stan. Gentlemen, any questions of staff?
I have
Commissioner Zork?
one. On the south parcel, did that include the old fire station site that was part of the original DRI dedication?
I don't believe part of what is in the 8.34 acres. There's still property that Grand Harbor owns that's a little south of that. Okay. I think that's where that particular original site was years and years ago.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, anyone else questions of staff?
Nope.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that would wish to speak to this? Good morning. Your name and address.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Steve Moeller from Masteller Moeller, representing Grand Harbor in this application. Bruce Barquette is also with me here today. We do not have a formal presentation. Obviously, we support the staff's recommendation. They've done a fine job in presenting our application. So if there's any questions you all might have of me or Bruce, we'd be glad to answer. But that's all I have.
Steve. Any questions of Mr. Moeller? Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public that would wish to comment on this? This is a public hearing to transmit the comprehensive future land use change to the state. So this is a transmittal public hearing. Any further comments? Okay. Seeing none. Gentlemen?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fletcher, second from Commissioner Davis. I have noticed that the the right side of the dais here is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here today.
that's mainly
anytime
talk.
Gentlemen want to jump in
He's nodding.
and participate. We can,
Whenever they wake up.
Yeah, whenever-
Close enough.
A few seconds in there.
Oh, okay, that's true. All right.
You didn't say good morning, gentlemen.
All right, so we do have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second from Commissioner Davis, to transmit the comprehensive future land use map amendments. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Stan.
We now come to the public discussion items. Please give your name and address and try to limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
It's the first time. It's the first time for everything, right?
Yes, there is. There's a request to speak from Charles Wilson, Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce, regarding information on the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning, sir. You'll recall that I stepped before you a couple of weeks ago and you suggested that I get on the agenda, and here I am. It's like a bad penny. It just keeps happening, doesn't it? You know. I'm here to give you some information about the formation of the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce that you probably have heard some information about. I will start off by telling you that you're all safe. One of the things that the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce does is that we do not accept any money from county government, which includes each of you. So even if you wanted to be a member of all the chambers, you can't. So you're all clear. Nobody has to make any choices. So congratulations. The mission of the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce is to encourage tourism, economic development, and protection of our environment and preservation of the lifestyle that is Vero Beach. We recognize that Vero Beach and the Barrier Island are unique places, and our motto is to think Vero first. We have often been asked, since the announcements have been made, several questions. Does Vero Beach really need its own chamber? Are you a real chamber? Are you competing against the Indian River Chamber, and what can you do that isn't already being done? So let's answer some of those questions. Why a Vero Beach Chamber? Well, Vero Beach is unique, just as Sebastian is unique, and Sebastian has a chamber. Why shouldn't Vero Beach have its chamber? I don't think any of you would suggest that the Sebastian Chamber doesn't offer additional help and additional support to the businesses of Sebastian. And that's exactly what we're doing. It's additional support. 60 to 70% of the tourism money that is collected for the bed tax comes from the area that the Vero Beach Chamber will now serve. You might not know that there are 2,465 licensed businesses within the city limits of the city of Vero Beach. Approximately 80% of them are a member of no chamber at all. As I mentioned, the Vero Beach Chamber is not dependent upon county money, and that allows us to specialize our efforts on the city of Vero Beach and the businesses within the city of Vero Beach. The agreement that you have with the Indian River Chamber includes a provision in its application that the chamber will not promote one area over another. Well, we believe that people sitting in Paducah, Kentucky do not come to Indian River County, they come to Vero Beach. And we would like to be able to advertise to that effect and to brand the city of Vero Beach in addition to the efforts that are being made on behalf of Indian River County. Are you a real chamber? Yes, we are fully licensed. We have city licenses, state licenses, county licenses. All of our information required for tax exemption has been applied for. We have 3 standing committees: Tourism, Economic Development, and Governmental Affairs. We have a organizational board that will operate until March 31st. After March 31st, we will seat a 15-member permanent board. We have 5 board members who have requested a seat on that board that we're considering, and we're really pleased at our progress. We do meet all the legal requirements to operate as a chamber of commerce. This is not a franchise. It's not like a Subway where you have to ask for permission. You have to the organization of a chamber of commerce has to do with its tasks and what we intend to do. And tourism, economic development, and governmental affairs are all within our charge. We have established offices at the 2001 building. We're also negotiating for additional locations. One of our plans is that we're putting in tourist information centers spotted around the city and along the barrier island with some, hopefully some signs that point as people are walking down the area near the beach, that they will be able to stop by different locations and get tourist information while they're here. We have websites, verochamber.com and welcometovero.com. And we are also negotiating in our final negotiations with connecting to verobeach.com, which has as many as 35,000 visitors in a month, many times the number of visitors that we currently have access to. We're on track to have our 100 founding members that we have, which is our goal by March 31st. I want to give kind of a shout out. One of our latest members that we just received the other day is Beth Moulton. Beth Moulton is a fine person in our community, produces Vero Beach Magazine, will help us produce our in-room magazines with her expertise. She was also just awarded the John Schumann Business Leader of the Year Award, which we think we're very pleased that she has decided to become our newest member. Many of the people will see advantages to both the Indian River Chamber of Commerce and the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce. As we say, we do not compete with the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce. We simply have a different and additional task that we like to do. Everything that the Indian River Chamber of Commerce currently does, they will be able to continue to do. We will not interfere in their operations in any way. We have written letters of support to them. Our letters that will be going out to our potential members all urge them to also consider the Indian River Chamber of Commerce in their membership decisions. We would like to have the same relationship with the Indian River Chamber of Commerce that the Sebastian Chamber has, and we have written a letter to that effect to Ms. McKenzie, who is the current president of our chairman of the board of the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce. And as we mentioned, we do not solicit nor will we accept government funds, and that means your tourism money will stay exactly where it is. We're not interested in it. Your economic development money will stay exactly where it is. You pay the Indian River Chamber of Commerce to do those tasks. You will continue to pay them, and they will continue to do them. Nothing will change in that regard. So what can we do that the Indian River, so why do we need us? What can we do that the Indian River Chamber doesn't do? We are not in competition, as I said, but there are differences. The first is the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce can promote Vero Beach hotels, restaurants, shops, and businesses exclusively. We are not required to include county and any other businesses in our publications, our advertising, as the Indian River Chamber is required to by virtue of their contract with you. We have target marketing. Our new Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce plans to focus on a different market. We've been talking about this for years, that Orlando and South Florida getaway vacation packages designed for families that include a round of golf or a boat trip or some tennis or some shopping or some other activity to encourage summertime visitors. We have enough crowds in the wintertime. We're after promoting the summertime in Central Florida. Speaking of Central Florida, there's a place called the Villages that wasn't even there 15 or 20 years ago. They are part of our target market, and we see great potential in weekend visits from the 80,000 plus people that have newly relocated, because there's one thing they don't have: a beach. And if we can be Orlando's beach, we can be the Village's beach for summertime getaways. Branding the Vero Beach name, as I mentioned, nobody in Ohio says, let's look up Indian River County. If they do, there's an Indian River County somewhere in Michigan. But the brand name that we believe that people will be familiar with is the city of Vero Beach. And we can and will identify that as a brand. Under economic development, our economic development concentration is a little different. The Indian River Chamber of Commerce administers a number of economic development programs for the county, jobs grants, etc. Most of those grants have yet to be dispersed, and most of them are not in the city of Vero Beach. We, however, support the Indian River Chamber of Commerce efforts, and we hope they continue to be successful and work closely with you on their efforts, but it doesn't involve us. The New Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce believes that our best way to expand business and prosperity in the city of Vero Beach and on the Barrier Island is to expand businesses that are currently here. Now, we do have a person-to-person plan. As you know, many of the businesses that relocate here do not relocate because of site plans. They relocate because they come down and visit their buddies and really enjoy the city of Vero Beach and say, gosh, I really wish I could stay here. And in our new economy, when you can live and work just about any place and accomplish your tasks, why not live in Vero Beach? So our person-to-person efforts being coordinated by some really fine folks, and on March 31st, when we seat our regular board, we'll announce who some of those people are, and I think you'll be impressed. But is to bring their friends down, and because we take no government money, we don't have to tell anybody. So we don't have to worry about, I know you've got protections where you don't have to discuss people's plans because that's have protections in government, the sunshine, but we have no sunshine requirements, and so we don't have to tell anybody. And so we can help them move without anybody knowing about it in advance and causing trouble back in their homes. Under media selection, the New Vero Beach Chamber plans to use electronic media, such as radio and television in the Orlando area particularly, instead of the more generic print publications and Visit Florida publications, which the Indian River Chamber does quite well and quite often. So if they come up and tell you, as they have in many presentations, all the wonderful things that they do, we agree. We stipulate they can continue to do those wonderful things. We're just going to do different wonderful things. So we're going to have a different approach to try and reach a different market of young families trying to get out of Orlando. The question is, in the summertime when all the world comes to Orlando, what happens to the poor people in Orlando? You know, they need to get out of town. And where do they go? They've been going to Brevard County. They've been going to Clearwater, which have become much more commercialized, and we believe that they will be attractive to what we have to offer in the summertime. Signature event. Now, we also have a number of events, as has been pointed out. We've got hibiscus festivals, and we've got art shows under the oaks, and they're all wonderful events, as most communities have multiple events. But we're going to be looking for a signature event. A signature event such as what Sunfest would be to West Palm Beach, what does Vero Beach have to identify itself? We're going to be working over that and gathering. We've gotten some really great suggestions about what those signature events could be. Well, we're looking forward to coming up with a really good plan and having a great time. All right, Vero Beach versus the county. Now, we're all neighbors and we're all friends. But occasionally, just occasionally, the county's interest and the city of Vero Beach's interest are not the same. So the question over the last year or two that has arisen is, who looks out for Vero Beach? And the answer is, it's hard to tell. So one of the things that the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce is going to do is we're going to concentrate on Vero Beach. Now, that doesn't mean that we represent Vero Beach government. It means that we represent Vero Beach businesses. And when we represent Vero Beach businesses having to do with affairs of the difference between the city and the county, there are some people more cynical than I that believe that there's somewhat of a war that takes place between the cities and the county. And fortunately, I'm not one of those cynical people that believe such a thing would happen. But if it were to happen and we were at odds, the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce will take the part of Vero Beach businesses. We have separate chamber and tourism websites. One of the things that we have found is we think that by going separately where people, I don't think somebody in don't want to pick on Paducah, Kentucky, but I don't think somebody in Paducah, Kentucky looks up the Indian River Chamber of Commerce. I think they look up the city of Vero Beach. We got a call yesterday from South Florida that found the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce about the car show under the Oaks, and we were able to tell them about that car show and the car show that's at the moorings called Wheels and Keels, and so they're going to come to both. This is just simply an additional function of the new Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce. We think it's important that they have access to information that they don't have to go through to find. And in summary, Vero Beach's Chamber of Commerce is a fully licensed operating chamber. Vero isn't like any other place, and like Sebastian, we would like to have our own chamber. Everything the Indian River County Chamber does now, it can continue to do. The Vero Beach Chamber can do what no one else can do, however, and that is think Vero first. Now, what are we asking of you? What we're asking of you is absolutely nothing. We don't want your money. We don't want your direction. We want to work together when it's time to work together. When it's not, I want you to know that we are going to represent Vero Beach because we want to think Vero first. And by having a separate chamber, we're allowed to do that. As far as boards and committees are concerned, that's up to you guys. If you would like the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce to sit on economic development to keep you apprised of what we're doing, or the enterprise zone, or some of the other things that you do, we'll be happy to appoint a representative to sit on those boards. If you don't want Vero to be represented, you may want to be explained to the voters of Vero Beach why they don't have the same rights as the city of Sebastian. I think that might be a difficult conversation to have in an election year. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Vero Beach Chamber of Commerce. We're here to serve. We're here to work. I've written a letter to Ms. McKenzie asking if we can cooperate and work together with all the chambers. And let me just say that we're working on it. Good. Are there any questions?
Any questions of Mr. Wilson? The only question I had, Charlie, you mentioned tax-exempt status. Are you a 501c3?
C6.
501c6? Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Did I go over 3 minutes?
Yes. Yeah, but
slightly. Thank you for your
time,
Commissioner. Thank you for your patience.
Yep. Next, we added to the agenda a request to speak from Susan Mayhew on the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Good morning and welcome, and name and address for the record, please.
I'm glad to see that 3-minute regulation's been lifted. No, thank you so much for adding me to your agenda today. First, I wanted to start by apologizing. In a letter to you recently, I stated that you have a train commission. And actually, I realize you don't have a train commission at this point, but the city does. And as a side note, I attended that meeting yesterday. And unfortunately, what I am seeing is that the train's going to come through here, and we're all going to pay millions of dollars for capital infrastructure improvement so that a private enterprise can try to run a sustainable operation, which a lot of us feel is probably not going to be doable. But that's neither here nor there at this point. I want to just go back in history slightly. I don't want to recap the whole argument about 750, but it relates to what I want to say today. Shortly after the election in November 2008, newly elected President Obama told a group of folks in Chicago that, I quote, "the era of suburban sprawl is over." Now, this had nothing to do with saving the planet, but all to do with a new form of redistributing our wealth. Because, you see, the Chicago community organizers and folks in major metropolitan cities where liberal policies had run the coffers dry realized that their tax base was moving out of the city and into the counties. And if they were going to continue to operate, they needed money, and it was going to come from counties. And hence we have the development of regional planning groups under the use of the billions of dollars that was spent by HUD, DOT, and EPA to create these regional governments that bypass elected governments and direct the use of multi-county tax budgets, direct changes in zoning laws, and force the development of HUD housing. That list goes on. And as we see, 750 and plans like it all around the country have been started, not to save the planet, but to implement the redistribution of wealth. It's for this reason that we asked you in the past year or two to get out of 750, but there's an organization still existing that is supporting it, and you are supporting it through using our tax dollars to support the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. And in fact, one of the members of that council recently said, "We're all here to bypass local government." So I'm asking you today, how long do you remain in a non-governmental organization that wants to bypass you? How long do we stay in an organization that, regardless of the fact that 3 of the 4 counties that it represents have left 750, they still continue to cling to the idea that 750 will be implemented, and it will be implemented here in Indian River County, partly because Sebastian and Fellsmere are still interested in participating. So what's happening now is that we that know the truth about this organization and this additional level of planning called Southeast Regional Planning Council now have to start educating the citizens of Sebastian about the ills of this plan so that they too will ask Sebastian to pull out. So we continue on and on to fight this, while the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council seems to think that everybody still wants it and our tax dollars are still well used to be in it. My question too is why we need these mega regional non-governmental boards when in an era of technology our planners can talk to their planners, our county execs can talk to their county execs, and they can bring back the information to you all, and you all can decide what you want to do about it. Now, citizens around the country are finding that these regional governments are funded through their states. So these citizens are going to the states and to their capitals to ask, can we stop this funding? Can we reduce their turfdom? Can we reduce their political clout? And can we cut back on the taxes that are going to support these non-governmental organizations? So now we find that the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council is becoming a lobbying organization. And they are going to go to Tallahassee on my dime and your dime to ask for more money and more power. And they're going to be using a multi-million-dollar budget to schmooze in Tallahassee. So I ask you, how does a common citizen or a group of citizens from your county fight this action? Where do we get the multi-million dollars to go to Tallahassee and try to get this stopped? And I ask that you consider your involvement in the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and how it is representing the interests of the people of this county and not just sucking away our tax dollars that we need for a lot of other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Smeel. I'll make a couple comments to that, if I could. I think you've made some very, very good points. And at that January 17th meeting of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, I also found a number of things very troublesome, including what you referred to as becoming a lobbying organization. They formed a new committee, the gubernatorial committee, and as I understood it, their charge was to go to the governor and lobby. And the other things that they mentioned at that committee, the thrust of which was to further transform the regional committees into a lobbying group, which again I found extremely troublesome. One of the most troublesome quotes that I heard that day that is consistent with that was made by Kevin Foley, who I think has been on there had been on. I understand he's recently been, I guess, not reappointed by the governor, but he made a quote which is one of those throwaway quotes which I don't think many people really understood. But he said, "We have had to reinvent ourselves." And I guess now it's reinventing themselves into a lobbying group. But the troublesome part in that is, my understanding is the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council was formed by the state of Florida. And it's the job of the legislators of the state of Florida to reinvent the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, not the Regional Planning Council itself. So a move like that undermines not only the rule of law, but given that they are trying to move further away from the elected officials, undermines at the same time representative democracy. So I'm with you. I find those moves incredibly troublesome. So I think that we ought to be considering our involvement in the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and reassess the propriety of our remaining in a board whose stated one of whose stated objectives is to bypass us. So
Right.
I thank you very much for your comments.
I don't know. I'm sitting there hearing these things at these meetings, and I'm saying, how does the common everyday citizen, particularly those who work and can't get down to wherever they're meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning, how do they know what's going on? How do they know that people are sitting there making plans for their county that have not been elected by by them? So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to get this on the public record, what's happening there. And I look to you to help us do something about it. Where right now, a group of us, I'm not with them obviously, they're down in Palm Beach, again, trying to fight 750 and get Palm Beach out of 750. So how long do we continue to cling to these things that nobody wants, and that every time we go to a city and tell the people there what they're going to do, they don't want them either. And we're still supporting it. So thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
No, that's just some good points. I mean, it got me whenever we started doing the budget process, and their funding stayed flat through this economic downturn. And I can't say there's anything that I know of that stayed flat as far as funding. And I couldn't answer the question. I mean, you know, why are we having to pay this much money to this organization? You know, what is their noble job that they do so well that they can't take a 5% cut or anything? And so that to me started to raise a flag about the organization also. And so I'm with you on that. But I think that really Commissioner Solari summed it up. This is really it's going to be something at the state level. That's got to be where this originated. Because I know I didn't vote for the initiation of it. And if I did, I would admit a mistake. But
Well, you know, who goes to Tallahassee and represents us there to try to get it stopped? I don't know.
Well, it's supposed to be us. Yeah. So we're going to have to do a better effort in that regard, I think.
I would like to address Commissioner Solari's comments on the gubernatorial committee. These are appointees made by the governor to the Regional Planning Council. For the most part, they are businessmen from their communities within those counties, and one of the gubernatorial appointees is a elected school board member. If you all remember last legislative session, the Senate and the House of Representatives included $2 million in funding for research for the Indian River Lagoon. And I think that's a goal that this board strongly supports. As a matter of fact, one of our legislative priorities for this year was continued funding of Indian River Lagoon projects and research. The governor is the one who vetoed that $2 million that was going to go to Indian River Lagoon research. So part of the reasoning for the Regional Planning Council to form the gubernatorial committee is, since they are the governor's appointees, they may be able to go to Tallahassee and convince the governor that that research money is critical to the overall health of the Indian River Lagoon and is a mandate supported by this Board of County Commissioners. That was part of our legislative delegation request, was to fund the lagoon projects and fund Indian River Lagoon research. So if we can use those gubernatorial appointees to help convince the governor of the importance of that research to the region, to the lagoon, to this county, then I'm going to utilize that as a way to try to get things going to fix the lagoon. And if Commissioner Solari is opposed to that, that's fine. But I am not opposed to trying to convince the governor that research into the Indian River Lagoon is not a bad thing. It is a good thing for the state to commit funds for research into the lagoon. And so I will continue to support that. The All Aboard Florida thing, Ms. Mayhew is very correct. It will be an impact in Indian River County with no benefit. And the same is happening to Martin and St. Lucie County. Palm Beach County, while they will have a stop, they have, the number was well over 100 crossings that they're going to have to deal with financially. And I think if the four counties can get together and tell the legislature that this is a huge impact to these communities and is a financial burden, and request the legislature to address it, I think that's a good thing also. Vero Beach, all 15,000 people, is going to ask the legislature to do something. I think if we have 2 million people asking the legislature to do something, we have a better chance of success. And I think that's, again, a common goal that everybody here can share, that All Aboard Florida will have a negative impact on our community and no visible benefit. There's no stop here, only the impacts. So, again, I think that by having united voices, we can achieve certain things that we all agree are important to this community. I understand some of your concerns, and I'm respectful of your concerns. I think a lot of the concerns, in my opinion, might be a little bit overdone. But I certainly respect your concerns. But I think that there's certain things in this region that we can all agree on and work together. I think that's a good thing. Do we have to agree on everything? No. But those things we agree on. Quiet zone issue, funding for the Indian River Lagoon, I think we have a better chance of getting progress done by having a united voice. And so that's kind of just where I stand on that issue.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Solari.
You evidently misunderstood something I said, because you said if Commissioner Solari is against the research for the lagoon. I'm absolutely not against research for the lagoon. I've been a proponent of research for the lagoon for many, many years. What I said was I'm against changing the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council into a lobbying group to lobby the government for things. This time it's the Indian River Lagoon. Next time it's going to be elements of the 750 plan, which this county is fully against. And I also don't think that we need to transfer the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council into a lobbying group, because the citizens have us. You have your Indian River Lagoon Initiative, which is made up of elected officials from 6 counties, or 5 counties now, if I understand it right. So there are plenty of groups of people composed of elected officials such as ourselves, whose proper task is to go up and lobby lobby the governor or the legislature for these issues. But every specific issue you said is not one that we need the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council for. It is generally our job. And one of the reasons why it's our job is because what we do is done a lot more in the sunshine, and our citizens can then come and ask us about it. Very, very few citizens of Indian River County have had a conversation with Michael Busha or the other staff members of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. But hundreds, if not thousands, of citizens of Indian River County have had conversations with us, their elected officials, and they know how to easily access us through either the phone or the email. So again, I really don't appreciate it when you continually turn what I say into something that I haven't said. So again, I'm not against research for the lagoon. I am, and I don't like the way you twist my words, but I am against turning the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council reinventing itself, undermining the rule of law, and turning itself into a lobbying group.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Solari.
I'd rather pay the $50,000 to a lobbyist than the Regional Planning Council if we want to get something done.
I'd agree with you. At least we can direct the lobbyist.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Ms. Mayhill makes an extremely valid point, something that I believe your representative form of government, we, the board, have represented our citizens in the most accurate fashion. We're hearing that there's no communication. There is no communication. I don't think that Ms. Mayhill could identify any other names on the board except for the few that she might have been able to cross paths. I find that the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council is one of the most autocratically orchestrated boards in existence, and they don't fairly represent your community, our community, the one that we've asked to serve. Again, Commissioner Solari, when you mentioned the amount of calls that we receive, it is incredible the amount of care and concern that's in this community that the Treasure Coast Regional Planning has no concept of, nor I do believe that they're open enough to even consider the input that the citizens have. After all, it's about the master plan. And that's what your county commission 4-1 voted against, to opt out of 750. In addition, I just wanted to touch base about the municipalities. The Metropolitan Planning Organization, again, there was a fashionable vote against 750 in support of opting out of 750. And I believe that many members of this board not only made that motion, well supported it and well defended the motion, and it gave accurate presentations. I want to thank all of the citizens of this county who've stepped up to the plate, who said, wait a minute, there's something that has an odor here, and the odor is coming from the south region and it's coming up north, and we don't want to have that odor here, because we are different here in Indian River County, and we do respond to the citizens, and we will continue to respond to the citizens. And I applaud you for stepping up to the plate, speaking about it today, giving us an additional opportunity to speak about it, and we'll continue to do so. After all, there is just 2 more municipalities. When those 2 municipalities realize the burden and not the value of what is taking place in the Treasure Coast Regional Planning with the 750, then the Indian River County will then, therefore, be removed from the listing. And it will most certainly, we've made requests, but they deny those requests, saying that there are municipalities here in Indian River County that are part of it. So therefore, Indian River County is still very much in the process. I want the citizens of Indian River County to know that we have opted out, and remind them that we've opted out. And as far as the Metropolitan Planning Organization as well, we have opted out. So there's just a few. So I wouldn't castigate and say that we're on the fence anywhere. I don't believe there's much on the fence here. It was a consistent 4-1 stance that we opt out of 750. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. McKenzie?
Thank you. Althea McKenzie. I think that as government, that we have a duty to educate the citizens. And normally, if a person is not here to defend themselves, typically in discussion, we usually ask the people to not talk about that person because they're not here. I think, and I would like to ask the commissioners, that we give the Treasure Coast Planning Regional Committee an opportunity to come and speak so that we can get an idea of what it is that everybody's so upset about, or what it is that they do provide or don't provide, so that we can know exactly what we're talking about. It seems as if this conversation has been building over the past couple of weeks, but the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council has been around way before President Obama was elected. They have been a very big help in many cities, and if their agenda has changed since they started, then I think we need to have them tell us the changes that are done. I think that is a fiduciary responsibility, to have the person come and say, okay, this is what we're doing, this is, like we give everybody else an opportunity to do. I think it's unfair to just put this message out and to critique other governments. Yes, you can, but I think those other governments deserve the respect of being elected officials as well, that they have decided to participate. And sometimes you have to be in the room to know what's going on for you to make an educated decision to back out. I think not being in the room and hearing the conversation and knowing what's going on is not the best approach, so that the citizens can receive proper information. By saying, okay, I'm just not going to participate, you're not giving yourself an opportunity to find out what's going on. You have to be present. There are a lot of meetings I go to that I don't like and I don't agree with, but I have to be there because it's important to get the information firsthand and get the information disseminated so that you can make a balanced decision. The Treasure Coast Regional Planning has a history of doing things, and if they're not, then you need to still be there to convince them that they're going in the wrong direction. By getting out and saying we're just not going to participate and we're not going to be in it, it is not helping the situation. It's almost childlike. So to be responsible, I would like to see a presentation from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning to defend. I mean, we just took money from them for the Brownsfield project, so, you know, we can't, sometimes we just need balance. And let's just figure out what this balance is, because I'm not understanding, I'm listening to the objections and I'm hearing, but I'd like to be able to quantify these things effectively. And if they come and make a presentation and it's definitely not in the best interest of Indian River County, then we need to give the public that opportunity to also participate in that decision-making process as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner
Yeah, I have no problem with them coming up here, but I mean, basically, believe you me, I don't think any bureaucracy would have any problem at all justifying their existence at a certain level. But let me tell you where they. I'll go back to not having to be in the room to feel the way I did. I was here whenever we had to lay off some lifeguards, packed room, and then and that tear, that scar that was a tough one. And whenever some of the things we were going through. And then for an organization like this to have the audacity to say that what they do is too important for their budget to even be considered for a cut, I'm telling you, Althea, I lost all respect for that bureaucracy in that process. And me being in the room, forgive me, it's not going to help me at all.
And I agree, and you've never participated, but I believe the 4 commissioners here have participated on some level with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning, and it's important to share that with the public, that I believe Mr. Wheeler was the president of that organization at one point.
He was chair.
Chair. Mr. Fletcher's been the vice chair. Mr. Zork participates, and Mr. Solari. So there was a relationship at some point, and there was some participation at some point. So now that you're not participating, I think we need to find out what is it that is really so horrible, instead of just putting this big ogre in the room. And is it real, or is it true, or is it just a fear that we're creating? And you cannot continue to take this approach of, I'm just going to put my head in the sand and I'm just not going to participate. Sometimes you have to be present. It's painful, but you got to be in it. I mean, I go to the school board and I sit and I go through all these things and I listen, and it's painful, but my kid is a student, and I have to sit through the process to learn what they're doing and how they're doing it, so that eventually, if they are going in a wrong direction, that you can bring some sense and sensibility to the organization and say, look. But to say, no, we're not going to be there at all, we're not going to listen, we don't want to hear what you have to say, is not. It's not what leaders should do. And that's just my recommendation, that we should kind of find out what everybody's up in an uproar about, because they have done things in the past that have helped. Thank you.
Commissioner Flesch and then Commissioner Solari.
I just wanted to point out that perhaps maybe some members of the public missed some of the public meetings that were publicly announced, that the 750 group came in here, did a presentation. Treasure Coast Regional Planning came up and did a presentation right here in the very chambers that you're sitting in. They had remote control devices, they had screens, they had interaction with the community to see their response. It was more or less like a polling, like a game show. And what they did was they incited an answer to best see what the demographics of the room was, as if you couldn't tell when you looked at the packed audience. In addition, some of the information that was relayed back on the screen that we looked at right up there, we looked on that screen, and you would be amazed at some of the information that they got from the people in the room because it was not accurately portrayed. That either meant one of two things. Either somebody pressed the wrong button many times, or the machine was actually putting different data up on the board. That was very concerning, very concerning. And there was a few other commissioners that are here now that were in the room, and I believe we saw the same thing happen. It was a smoke and mirror show. And that's not enough. That's not enough to say, hey, we want out. But what was enough was the consistent denial of what we stand for here in Indian River County, what many organizations that attest to the findings of the constitutional form of government, that your elected officials, those people that you choose to govern in your community and have a relationship with and can speak with and can approach, will have those decisions. And in addition, another comment that was made about, there are certain issues that the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, we are consistent with some of those issues. And I'll say that there are times where we have had a 5-0 vote on situations that have been discussed at the Treasure Coast Regional Planning. Lightning can strike. It's for a very different reason. We have mitigated the circumstances. We have looked at, we have communicated with our community, we have assessed it, and it's a whole different process than just making a decision based on a global event and bringing it forward and then imposing it upon Indian River County. Again, there were many meetings that were presented here in these chambers. There were many discussions. There's much communication that have taken place. And I don't believe that the public did not get a fair and equal opportunity to have input from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning. They've been at the MPO as well. And I believe that although they're very tough to identify on the faces because they come and go, and we are here on a consistent basis, but they do come here, and there was some communication, and I believe that some citizens can attest that they did see some sort of presentation. Was anybody present during that other meeting with the electronic buttons? Okay, we have a whole different crowd. But believe me, I believe you are here. There was an event that took place, and it was definitely an educational experience as to what the intentions were. And they most certainly weren't about your community, your environment, and the responsiveness that we have gone through for so many years. I do believe you're accurate that the Treasure Coast Regional Planning has shifted paradigms. They have changed their approach. I think that, yes, they were here for a very long time. And regionalization has come and gone. We have to look at what is your county doing. Your county is probably in the best financial situation, thank you, Joe and Jason, that any other county can be compared to in as far as the group. And we stand alone. We want to stand alone because we are doing better. We're doing more efficient services. And many of the services that you had grown to appreciate were removed in other jurisdictions. What does that have to do with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning? Not much. But I will say this. It defends the process that we're trying to ensure that you have the representative form of government and that these decisions are not made in a regionalized manner in unelected, non-choice positions. The people that work in that council are there, and they get appointed, and their lucrative salaries are justified by their decisions. And you say, yes, we can make those decisions. Once we're confronted with what their decisions are, we can either codify, qualify, or deny. But it's a slippery slope. And once funding starts to take place, and once government funding gets en route and starts coming up this way, it's very difficult to make those changes once we have a full picture and the canvas is laid out. It's very difficult not to have the painting that they want to have with their oils and your money. Thank you.
Commissioner Slaughter?
I'll just add to what Commissioner Flesher said. So we did have the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council up here for over 3 hours on October 25th, 2012, when they gave their work group roadshow. That was an event which I believe galvanized the citizens of Indian River County against the 750 plan, because it showed them how it was being done and how they were being manipulated. The Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council staff was up here again on December 18th, 2012, when this chamber was filled with citizens, and that was the night we withdrew from the 750. But we have to make a distinction between the 750 plan and the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. We are still members of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Chairman O'Brien is presently chairman of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I am a member of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and I was down there again this past January 17th, where I heard those things which troubled me so well. And I will agree with you. It sometimes is painful going to those meetings and sitting through those meetings and seeing them do things which you believe are against their core values. But again, I agree with you that it is necessary. For me, it was particularly painful this last January 17th when I was down there, and I had been on the Budget and Personnel Committee for the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council for over 3 years. I was taken off about 13 months ago because of my stand on 750. There were new appointments this January, and I asked the chairman, Commissioner O'Brien, if I had done enough penance and perhaps I could be put back on the Budget and Personnel Committee. But I was told that I didn't have the leadership qualities for that. That because of my stand against 750, I did not have the leadership qualities to be on the Budget and Personnel Committee of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. Now understand, that's a council whose staff, when asked for the budget of the SEDS, gives them the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council budget. But I didn't have those qualifications. So yes, I find deep problems with that group, but I just want to assure you that I will continue to go down there and represent the citizens that have elected me, regardless of how painful it is.
And Commissioner, sorry, just again, not to have words twisted, my comments were that it was your leadership of the association that I had an issue with, and I don't believe that a member of an organization who is actively trying to kill that organization or actively trying to withdraw from that organization should hold a leadership spot in that organization.
Withdraw from what organization?
Withdraw from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council.
No, up until that time, I had only tried to get us out of 750. You cannot name a public action I've taken to withdraw from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council up until January 17th.
Okay.
But I think now that might change.
Well, my dislike for the Regional Planning Council goes back when I stood within Senator Pruitt in Tallahassee and his goals of unraveling the Regional Planning Council at the time, and that's going back a few years. They have gone through that period of time, and now the 750 program that's gotten in, and they're reinventing themselves to deal with the changes that Senator Pruitt brought that they had to deal with. So I almost would rather see in some instances standalone, which is not good because you can't reach out on the items that you might be able to count on one hand that you're in favor with the rest of the region. But if you go back to the Mr. DeBartolo days when they originally wanted to bring the mall here before they constructed it the first time, and you saw the list of comments that the Regional Planning Council submitted, some of them were laughable, like rooftop tennis courts to add recreational elements to the site. You know, some of their expectations are it's like a dream list. So I've not been a fan of the Regional Planning Council concept. Maybe it's managed better in other parts of the state. I don't know. But and then the portion of when they felt that their duty was so important that they couldn't contribute any reduction in reducing the assessment that the counties pay to them, just kind of showed their they're more important than the lifeguards were, which was I wasn't here at that time, but I know that had to be a very tough decision to make. You're cutting a lifeguard, but the people that run the Regional Planning Council can't find a dollar that they could, and maybe they did cut a dollar, so I shouldn't probably say that, but I'm not a big fan of the Regional Planning Council folks, and we thought this was addressed years ago, but it's re-evolving and coming back as a new animal that we'll have to figure out how to deal with in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Gentlemen, does that conclude it?
For today.
We will go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Wesley, have you...
Well, thank you. I think your job today was better than at the city council, too. I think, ditching the dress jacket was probably a plus. But thank you, Charlie. I appreciate that. Hello.
And it blames you.
We'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. At this point, I'd like to ask the County Attorney, Dylan Reingold, to go ahead and read into the record the public notice items. Mr. Reingold, please.
To the Chair, thank you very much. To the Chair, to the Commission, and those in the audience and watching at home, I've got a couple public notice items. First is notice of scheduled public meeting on February 10th, 2014. St. Johns River Water Management District public meeting to discuss draft water supply plan. Also have notice of scheduled public presentation on February 5th, 2014. That is a presentation by Mr. Julius E. Hallis, Director of the Florida Division of State Fire Marshal on ISO county ratings. The third item I would like to mention is that the County Attorney's Office would advise of its desire to have a closed attorney-client session on February 11th, 2014. That is concerning a pending case, Pelican Island Audubon Society, Dr. Richard Baker and Dr. David Cox versus Indian River County and St. Johns River Water Management District. The pending case is before DOA, and it is case number 13-3601. This is the Oslo boat ramp issue, and that would be for a time certain of 10:30 a.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dylan. I just want to reemphasize the Water Management District hearing on the public water supply. That's this coming Monday, February 10th, from 5 to 7 p.m. over in Conference Room B. I think it's important that everybody, the public, we need to show up and listen to the presentation and provide comment. This is our future water supply, and I think it's a very critical public hearing. And I would strongly encourage everyone, if they can, to attend that Monday, February 10th, 5 o'clock over in Conference Room B. And Commissioner Zork, your ISO meeting could have impact for families as well. So I think we should make sure they're well aware of that as well.
Yes. Also, one other on the importance on the St. Johns Water Management District meeting. I attended the St. Johns River Alliance meeting last Thursday, and it really should be the limited future water supply plan, because the amount of water that's going to be available, I believe it's till 2035, is not a large amount of water when you look at the area that it encompasses. And so I'd shared a few concerns about the small amount of water that's available for the future, and it will be a considerable growth management tool that will have to be looked at when they say there's no water left to consume. That will have a bit long-lasting effect on a lot of areas along the St. Johns River area. So the people that may have a need today or in the future for water need to make sure they're there to share their concerns.
Right. Good. And Dylan, since you've noticed this as a public notice, multiple commissioners can be there, and we don't have any problem with the public requirements, correct?
That's a public meeting. The one thing I would just advise the commissioners, if you attend, just please be there to listen and hear what the district has, so you don't end up getting into a debate amongst each other
Absolutely.
at the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That now takes us, there's no county administrator matters. Under departmental matters, A, community development, consideration of extending the temporary suspension of 3 impact fees, memorandum dated January 23rd, 2014. And good morning again, Mr. Bowling.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. No PowerPoint for this one.
Oh.
Sorry. Don't want to fatigue you with those. Since 2009, the board has suspended a number of the county's 9 impact fees. Initially, 5 impact fees were suspended, and then in 2011, and since then, the board has suspended 3 impact fees to stimulate construction activity The last suspension was approved by you all in 2012, and those 3 fee suspensions will expire on March 31st of 2014 unless you all decide to extend them. And if you decide to extend them, you do need to make that decision now so staff has time to set a public hearing and provide notice to the cities and do the extension. Staff's analysis, which is in your backup, looking at the data, has the suspension stimulated construction activity, which was the purpose of the extension. And I think from that data, you can't draw a real firm conclusion one way or the other. The building activity has tended to go along with the general economic slight recovery, I would say, off the bottom. But staff believes there are 3 reasons for you all to consider a short-term extension. One is that we're still in a fairly slower growth period, and suspending the fees a little bit longer will not have a significant impact on impact fee revenues. It may stimulate some building activity and is consistent with your economic development policies. And a third compelling reason is because we're updating the current fee schedule, probably going to see non-residential fees drop fairly significantly. If you don't extend the 3 fees now, you'll actually have a period of time when fees will go up and then you'll have them go down. And so staff believes to keep the fee situation consistent, the board should consider granting a 1-year extension or until the new fee schedule takes effect. So staff is requesting that the board authorize staff to set a public hearing to extend the 3 fee suspension for 1 year or until the new fee schedule goes into effect. Be glad to answer questions that you might have.
Any questions of
Yes, I have one more of a policy side. When we, and I like the idea of waiting to see what the future holds with the new fee calculation and justification when we collect and when we don't collect. But based on the I think it was Lee County Home Builder Association lawsuit, that when the fees go back into effect, I think it's called the contract impairment provision, that there's a notice period and a transition going back in, and I don't know what the compliance rules of that are, but we just want to make sure, and I think contract impairment was the underlying language, that once the fees goes back in or they change, that there's an impairment period, and just so that we're in compliance with that.
Dylan,
by surprise.
I heard a question in there, I believe, and if I didn't hear when I saw a bunch of faces turn toward me. Essentially, I can always tell you under the statute, you do have your 90-day period under the statute.
Okay.
And certainly we'll be working with staff, making sure we meet all of the necessary timelines set forth within the statutory requirements.
All right.
Okay.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, second from Commissioner Zork. Any discussion?
I'll just note when it comes to us, I'll probably be voting against to be consistent. If this is just to bring it before us in the public hearing, I'll vote for it today.
Okay, so noted. Is there any comment from the public on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Stan. Office of Budget Management, quarterly budget report. Good morning, Mr. Brown. Welcome.
We're getting a PowerPoint.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Brien. Yes, as Commissioner Fleischer notes, you guys got off easy with community development not having PowerPoint, but unfortunately, here it comes. I'll try and be brief here. So, for the record, Jason Brown, County Budget Director. The first quarter of the fiscal year 2013-14 ended December 31st, so we are presenting a brief quarterly budget report, as we've been doing for the last couple of years. This first slide is basically a snapshot. The green arrows up are good, the red arrows down are bad. There's a little bit of a mixture there. On the left-hand column, you have the year-to-date change versus the previous year, and in the right column, you have the year-to-date change over the budget, compared to the budget. So you can see optional sales tax up about 1.9% through December. Tourist tax, we can continue to see strong growth, 10.9% up from last year. We were up about 11.5% last full fiscal year, and that's really been one of the early bright spots in the economy, and has continued to perform well and kind of lead the local economy. like to think that those tourist tax funds are being invested fairly wisely. Hopefully, is what that means. Obviously, the hoteliers and the other businesses are out there doing their thing to drum up business, but hopefully the tourist tax, as I like to say, is kind of like priming the well. You collect the tourist tax and you reinvest that into the things that continue to promote tourism and keep that going. Half-cent sales tax were up about 2.6% from last year, but just barely up over the budget of 0.1% over the budgeted amount. Traffic impact fees, that's down slightly for the year, way up over the budget by about 9%. This revenue source fluctuates quite a lot, so it's hard to make too much of those big swings month to month. It varies. And franchise fees were down about 2.6% from the current year. You can see they're down 21% from the budget, but that's because we've received about 2 months worth of payments, whereas there are 3 months into the fiscal year. So that's a timing delay of getting those payments reimbursed, and not a substantial issue there. Optional gas tax were down about 2.1% from the previous year, down about 2.9% from the budget. The gas tax continues to not perform that well. As you know, it is a cost a tax per gallon and not a percentage. So whether gas is $2 a gallon or $4 a gallon, we get 6 cents, and that does not increase as the fuel prices increase. People cut back on their driving when the fuel price goes up. Obviously, as the economy during the downturn, people cut back on their driving. This revenue stream has been down, and with new fuel standards, federal government has increased the fuel standards going forward. So we anticipate that this revenue will continue to underperform into the future as we replace as the fleet of vehicles out there in the general community rolls over. They'll get more fuel efficient, go the same distance, use fewer gallons of fuel, and pay less in gas tax.
Jason, one question, if you could back up one. Sure. On the franchise fees, on the timing delay, on the new franchise fee on the natural gas line. I know at one time they caught up a period, from the effective date, which was, I think, was July or August. How often do those payments come in from them now? Are they on a normal cycle, or are they still trying to get their footing?
They have come into the regular cycle. There was a little bit of a catch-up where they didn't get that implemented right away. Mm-hmm. However, now they are remitting those on a monthly basis, and they are on cycle.
And do we know roughly on that specific one, I know we had a fairly low annual projection of what we thought it would bring in, of where that's at versus actual. I know it's a little early to tell, but...
Yeah, we're getting about $7,000 a month from that revenue stream. We had budgeted $30,000 for the year, so it is performing a little better than we expected. We wanted to be conservative when we set the budget amount. We talked to the folks at Florida City Gas. They indicated what they thought the amount was, and we went with a conservative number of about $30,000, and it's looking more like about $7,000 a month so far.
Okay.
And we'll have more history. We don't know about the seasonality of that and the long-term usage. And there's one or two large customers that their usage could change substantially too. Major revenues, ad valorem taxes, we received about 76% of the levied amount through December 31st, and that is normal. We get the bulk of our payments in December from property taxes. They are due by the end of March. However, you get a 4% discount if you pay in by the end of November, which is what a large portion of the taxpayers do, and then the tax collector's office remits those fees to us in December. So we're right on target with last year. I think last year we were at 75.8% at the end of December. So that's just going as planned. Half-cent sales tax, I should say November is up 6%. Year-to-date is up 2.6%. So we have 2 months of collections there. Franchise fees are down about 2.6%, and that relates to changing utility rates. As FPL, City of Vero, adjust their rates, the franchise fees move up or down with those. So we're down a little bit. I will point out that this is an important revenue stream for us. It's now our largest revenue source in the MSTU that used to be property taxes before the downturn, but we lowered the property taxes so much that now our levy in the MSTU, which serves the unincorporated county, is about $7.5 million, and franchise fees bring in about $8.5 million. So this is a very important revenue stream for us in keeping those property taxes down. Impact fees are up from the budget. However, there's much fluctuation on a month-to-month basis. As I mentioned, gas taxes are down to about 2%. General fund, where are we? We're 25% of the way through the year. At the end of the first quarter, revenues are about 54%. That's due to the ad valorem tax collection. Obviously, we've received about 76% of those, as I stated. And so that's about two-thirds of the total revenues. On the expenditure side, we've expended 31.8% of the budget through 25% of the year, so that would sound like it is over the budget amount. However, I will point out that the constitutional officers, we have to make their draws on the first day of the month, so that they can have those available. They're typically done on the last day of the previous month, so at December 31st, we'd actually done 4 draws for the constitutional officers. Also, the supervisor of elections actually gets 25% of the budget in the first draw, and that's due to the unique nature of that office, because frequently you have an election in November, and if we only gave the supervisor of elections office 1/12 of the budget like we do with the others, they wouldn't be able to put on an election in November. So in recognition of that, the statutes require 25% of the budget distributed in October. Tax collector also, all of those ad valorem taxes that we receive, there's a fee that's charged by the tax collector for collecting those. At the end of the year, the tax collector remits the excess fees back to us. But in the interim, that is a large expenditure that's over the amount budgeted.
Yeah, counties are the only one that have to pay for tax collector to collect. The state legislature exempted cities and schools, so we pick up their tab. We ought to be honored, because it was supposed to be a collection fee. It's not a true collection fee; it's an arbitrary fee. That's and I think they need to change that law. But I've put it on the legislative thing for 25 years, and it never happened. So don't give up.
Thank you for that quarterly update.
Oh yeah.
Quarterly
update. We do have we do pay that on behalf of the cities and the school board. For some reason, the independent taxing districts have to pay their own. I don't know how they got stuck, but it's just us and the hospital district, mosquito control district have to pay our own way. But and then we pay for everyone else, as Joe mentioned. MSTU fund, we're at 35% of revenues through December 31st, and about 23.4% of expenses, right where we expect to be on expenses. Franchise fees, as I mentioned, our largest revenue source here, are down about 2.6%, but pretty close to in line with the budget once you account for the collections. And absent sales tax is up about 2.6%, and the expenses are on target. And once again, the revenues are over, largely because of the ad valorem taxes. We've collected about 75% here as well. Transportation fund, we've collected about 17.5% of the revenues and spent about 16.7% of the budget. There's some one-time charges, auto insurance, that are usually occur in March, so that's why the expenses are under. And then we've also got some receivables like gas taxes that make the revenues less than the budget. Emergency Services District, we've collected about 63% of the revenues, and that is the highest amount because the district is the most reliant on ad valorem taxes of all of our funds. We really have ALS charges as our main other revenue source, which provides about $4 million, $4.2 million. The rest is mostly ad valorem taxes here. Expenses are about 21%, which is under the 25%, right about in line with where we are. There have been 5.3 pay periods out of 26.1, so that's about 20.4%. Once again, salary and benefits make up about 85% of the Emergency Services District budget, so that flows very, very closely with the salaries. So we're right on line with the budget there. We're also under expending a little bit. We had budgeted some funds for a modest salary increase. However, we're still in ongoing negotiations with the IAFF. So that's another reason for a slight under expenditure there, but that's good. We're down to a $500,000 planned use of fund balance this year from $2.5 million last year, so we seem to be running right along in lines with that. Building division, our enterprise funds overall, let's go over. The building division is up. We're about $60,000 ahead of last year. Revenues are up again about 10% from last year. Last year was up about 25% from the year before, so continuing to see strong numbers here. Like the impact fees, it fluctuates week to week, month to month. Sometimes we have very good weeks. Sometimes we have weeks that are less good. But overall, building permit activity is holding up pretty well. Golf course, we're running about $60,000 behind last year. That is due to the pipe repair that was done. We had about a $90,000 pipe repair. Our revenues are up about 4.2% over last year, and our expenditures without that $90,000 pipe repair would be down. So once you counteract that, we would be up from last year. We had a very good year last year. Paid off the interfund loan to the gas tax, and the golf course is on very good footing. And like I said, our revenues are up about 4% from last year, so that's a good sign. Solid Waste Disposal District, we're about $300,000 over last year. Our revenues are up about 3%, and expenses are down about 7% from last year. Fleet Management Fund, we're right at break even there. Last year we had a slight loss of about $27,000 at this point. We made some adjustments mid-year last year, reduced another position, have made some operational improvements over there, and we're basically showing a $2,000 loss. But on a $3.5 million operation, that's really right at break even. Shooting range, we are running slightly ahead so far this year. During the season, we're about 16.5 in the black, so the shooting range is covering expenses so far this year. We did accomplish that last year. Has been hit or miss over the years, as we've said before. Once we get some improvements done with the sporting clays course and all those programmed improvements there, we think this may be a candidate for enterprise fund, as we think that will put it into the black permanently. Without any question. Next, utilities. We're running a little bit ahead of last year. Our revenues are up maybe about 2%, so showing a slight net income increase over last fiscal year. That being said, I am available if you have any questions.
Gentlemen, questions of Jason?
I do not necessarily. Yes, not necessarily of the quarterly report, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
More along the lines of trying to increase some of the returns on some of the dollars that we have parked in the bank accounts. And I've had some preliminary conversations with Mr. Baird as well as with Mr. Smith, our clerk, and not wanting to do anything risky, but at the same time trying to do perhaps better than what we're doing right now, and quite frankly, even also seeing if we might be able to get a better deal on putting out again to bid or our banking services, and especially just see if we can get a little, more aggressive terms from a financial institution. Just throwing that out to find out the flavor of the board. Obviously, I can't speak to anybody that's up here about it other than staff and Mr. Smith. So, just my thoughts.
I'd just like to add one thing before the clerk speaks. After being at the FMPA meeting and finding out that their financial advisor advised them to take part of the $500 million in cash and put it in Chicago and L.A. County school district bonds that are now in question of being repaid, that we not look at those types of alternatives.
I tell you what.
Jeff Smith here.
Commissioner Davis, you're not happy with the 0.27% yield on our investment?
I'm not. It might be the best we can do for and don't get me wrong. I know we are conservative, and I know. Yeah. I feel like, quite frankly, though, in light of where we were 5 years ago and the uncertainties, and I feel like we're somewhat through this. And with that being said, is it time for us to look at something a little bit more of a higher yield? And of course, the higher the yield, perhaps a little more of the risk. But I'll turn it over, I guess, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Smith.
Absolutely. Good morning, Jeff. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Smith, your clerk and comptroller. As your comptroller, I'm statutorily required to invest your surplus funds, and as on your agenda item this morning under the consent agenda, your 12/31 December 31st 2013 investment report showed that we are 96% secure. That means that at any point in time, 96% of the total portfolio is 100% collateralized and or insured. Now, it comes with that, obviously, when you have more security comes less return, and I'm fully aware of that. However, we have purposely done that based on the circumstances for the last 5 years, the economic slowdown / slight recovery that we're experiencing. But you all, as commissioners, have been very patient, and I caution you that your patience is about to be rewarded. We have purposely kept the portfolio short and to be able to give you all the opportunity when rates start to inch up to take advantage of that. Recently, we have just done that. We have moved $43 million into fully collateralized money market accounts at banks and increased the rate. Now, that seems counterintuitive to you, but I'll explain it to you. Banks right now are competing more and more for funds, especially government funds. We moved $23 million into a bank that's given us 45 basis points, which is 30 basis points more than what we were earning where the money was parked before. This is a 5-star bank. You want to make sure that you do business with a 5-star bank, nothing less than that. We've done our due diligence, and we've made sure that the bank is a 5-star bank and a QPD, which means that they have to 100% collateralize any government funds that are in that bank, which this is. So we have been able to get 45 basis points on that money market funds. We're seeing money market funds gradually, slowly inch up. And so we're taking advantage of that. Your investment policy that you approved allows us to put no more than 10% of the total portfolio in money market funds, mutual funds, local government investment pools, and CDs. And so we're staying within that investment policy. We've also moved $3 million into a 2-year CD that's paying us 85 basis points. So we're looking to take advantage of everything that we can to get you more return, but keep the risk low. The 3 principles in investing government funds, first of all, safety. The second one is liquidity, and the third one is a return. Safety is 97% of your portfolio is secure. Liquidity, we have laddered the portfolio so that every week we have maturities coming in to fund operations, payroll, construction contracts that you've executed, and whatnot. So we have the portfolio laddered that we will always have money coming in to sustain operations. And return, obviously there's some risk involved. When you want to get a higher return, you're going to have to assume some kind of risk. Basically, the 3 kinds of risk that you face is security risk. Is the investment that you're investing in worthy of investing? Are you going to get your principal back 100%? Credit risk is the securities that are underlying that investment. Are they going to falter? And the third one is interest rate risk, which is when you lock yourself into a long-term investment and rates start to increase, you're not going to be able to take advantage of those increasing rates because you're locked in long term. The advisory committee that we have set up has been emphatic and strongly endorsed my philosophy of staying short during this economic downturn to allow you all to take advantage when the opportunity arises of increasing rates. And that's where we're seeing a little bit of that happen now, and we're taking advantage of that.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, along those lines, and with you investing the money market, I'm not talking necessarily about that, but let's just take the CDs. Do you do some, I'm going to call it staggering or laddered almost, where you have a 30-day, some 6-month 1 year and then 2 year, and kind of like divide those dollar figures evenly in each one of those, so to take advantage of exactly what you're talking about. To take advantage, you get your higher rate on the 2 year, your lower rate on the 30 day. But as those rotate out, then you take your 30 day maybe and put that in the 2 year. And then you understand what basically it kind
we're
of
doing that right now. We're doing that with mostly federal government investments, treasuries and treasury notes, and agencies. And
those are thrown
the
off
short-term CD rates are very minimal. And so there's not really any need. We can get those treasuries back at any point in time. If you lock yourself into CD, then we have to wait till that CD matures before we can get that back.
Okay.
So yes, we do have the portfolio laddered, exactly what you're describing.
Laddered, that's the term.
Yeah. And as far as the banking contract is concerned, we do review that. We go out for bid every, I think we're in the middle of a 5-year term, and as soon as that term expires, we will go out to bid. We open it up to every qualified public depository in the area. They have to be a QPD in order to accept government funds.
Right.
We allow every bank to participate and to bid on the contract, and we evaluate that on a schematic scale with Jason's input to see which one was going to be the most favorable based on services that we need and return on our excess funds overnight, that sort of thing. So yes, we do that periodically, and we will do that again when the current contract expires.
So we're 2.5 years out from that, though.
Yeah. We're with Wells right now.
Okay.
I'd like to also point out that they've done an excellent job investing over the years. Our comptroller's office, we didn't have the big losses on the risky derivatives that adjoining counties where they lost $20 and $30 million.
Yeah.
We never had that.
Right.
And that's hard to recover from. You know, when you lose, you lose your entire principal. That's not good.
Yeah.
So, and I think that, Jeff's office done a good job.
Joe, to me, I think the win-win things we've done recently is paying off some of the bonds in our utility enterprise funds and such, and then the enterprise fund pays a lower interest rate, and we get a higher return on our funds. I think we've been funding that out of the general fund reserve. Jeff, would those kind of things be eligible under our investment plan that you oversee?
Mm-hmm.
Or okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, because it seems to me that we ought to look at every opportunity we can to take advantage of that, and maybe some of the Dodgertown bonds, if they're within 3 or 4 years, if they're callable, we could pay those off and interfund borrow. But I see that as a way of getting a higher return and reducing the interest outflow for whatever the utility.
The
or
option to refund your outstanding debt, Jason in the budget office does a really good job of reviewing that and taking advantage of when it is good for you all to get to refund those bonds and or to pay down on those bonds to reduce the interest in the future.
Right. Okay.
For instance, we're going to try that with that big utility bond. It comes, the call date's 2015, and we're going to pay off, I think, roughly $23 million, which is going to take $2.7 million out of debt service, and we don't earn that kind of money on our investments that we're paying for that board money. In a different environment, we could defease the issue before the call date, but treasuries are so low that you have negative return to the date, so you can't, it financially does not work.
Okay. I just would just say, keep looking for every opportunity like that. If there's a way we can pay off a bond and reduce the outflow and return a little bit more, I think that's a good win-win. So, okay, Jeff, thank you very much. Jason, any other questions for Jason on the budget report? I don't think we need to take action on that. So, Jason, thank you very much for your presentation. Dylan, yes.
If I may really quickly, I'm going to just bounce back to the previous agenda item. Commissioner Zork asked a question about the Lee County case. I just want to quickly, as I've got everyone in the room, is in the Lee County case, what happened is that you had the Lee County adopt a school impact fee for the first time. And what the issue is that the court addressed the issue of the impairment of the contracts that were in existence at the time, and those people who had entered into contracts, not knowing about this fee and then imposing a fee on those contracts. The issue here, I think what your staff has done a great job over time is that you specifically set forth in your code is that this is the time period by which this waiver will be in effect. So clearly people are on notice of when the fee will not be in effect and that it potentially may come into play. But I will certainly work with Stan Bowling on this ordinance, making sure that we do not trip up on any impairment of contract issues. But I just wanted to reiterate those issues just back to the board while we were all still here. So thank you for letting me have that time.
Thank you, Dylan. Okay, there's no other departmental matters. There's no county attorney matters. It does take us to commissioners' items, and Commissioner Bob Solari, his first item is alternative water supply, memorandum dated January 28, 2014. Commissioner Solari.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As many of us are aware, the St. John's River Water Management District came and gave us a report recently about the district water supply, and that report reminds us that the county currently uses the upper Floridian aquifer as the source of most of the county public water supply, and that there is a limit to the expansion of this water as the water supply as the county grows. Indian River County in 2007 did an alternative water master plan, and it was drawn up in part to address this limitation. It looked at 3 alternative possibilities for an alternative water supply: desalinization, the superficial aquifer, and the freshwater supply that we have in the county. While noting that developing a freshwater supply would be work, the report stated, quote, "This report recommends the pursuit of a surface water source as the long-range alternative supply for the county." I think the Commission rightly did the right thing by delaying much work on that as we went into the downturn, but I think Mr. Gross's presentation is a wake-up call that as the economy is turning somewhat better now, it's probably time for us to revisit the alternative water supply plan, specifically the use of fresh surface water as a future supply for drinking water, and hoping that the Commission today will authorize a feasibility study to develop a fresh surface water system complete with the necessary reservoir system. This proposal would include a request for funding from the St. John's River Water Management District for part of the funding, but not be dependent upon that funding. My understanding is that St. John's generally doesn't provide money for this type of feasibility plan, but may if asked properly. So I do know that a couple people are here to speak today, so if it's all right with the chairman, we'll let them speak and then...
Yeah, and just for clarification, Commissioner, would it be more worthwhile to have staff do an overall water supply plan again and look at all the alternatives, or do you think at this point it just makes sense for them to focus on a surface water project?
From everything I know, I think we ought to be just focusing on the surface water project. I see nothing from a review of the 2007 plan to indicate that desalinization would be any cheaper, and I certainly would not recommend going to the shallow aquifer for water. I think that's already impaired in areas of the county, and I wouldn't want to add to that in any way.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question, maybe to look at as a step before going to the next step would be, is I know I was trying to get a handle on the excess capacity that we currently have wells in the ground for. Then we have wells that are permitted, not yet in the ground. What is that capacity in place, future permitted capacity, and match that with the demand loads of what the comp plan and our projected growth percentages might be. I think in speaking with the administrator a few days ago, we apparently had installed an increased capacity ahead of the curve, so we have a lot of in-place capacity not yet used, is to somehow quantify what we have today, what we can have without going back to the district, quantify that, and then look at what our demand water supply might need to be, and kind of use that as to know how would you approach what volume of freshwater supply would you need to have to fill the potential identified shortage with what we currently have sort of in place, or some of it's in place, some of it's can be put in place, it's permitted, and to know the scope and scale of what you might need to have, if that's a way to phrase a question.
Yeah, I think we probably go ahead with today's matter, but at the same time ask the utility staff to come up with that. I'm not going to speak for Vinny, he's ready to speak for himself, but I would think that would be something that the utility staff could get done before they can actually come up with then...
Oh, true. I think it'd be pretty easy
Yeah.
exercise
So
for him.
we can ask him to do both simultaneously, and I think that he'd come back with your request prior to he would for mine, Commissioner Zork. But I'll let Vinny speak for himself.
And with that, if a hypothetical, and I don't know what the answer would be, but if it somehow illustrated that we have enough water permitted in place and permitted to be put in place that lasts X years, and depending how big X is, if it's 5 years, that's a critical, imminent problem. If it's 50 years, that's not a critical, imminent problem, is to try to get and then also what's the gap of what would we be trying to bridge to use for the alternative water supply.
Good morning, Vinny.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. To answer your question simply, we have capacity built into our system to address our needs for water through 2030. The problem herein lies with the district's ability to cap or modify our withdrawal rates. And so we would have an ability to actually withdraw more water production-wise than would be allowable by the district. So the previous utilities director had the foresight and was able to, with the county commission oversight, expend some dollars on the capital side to put in some additional wells that were asked of the 2007 report, where the well field on the north part of the county was actually increased to about 9 wells. We have ability to add another well in the south part of the county as well, but not to increase production, but to limit some of the production from our existing 6 wells. So in that regard, we have an updated capacity analysis that staff did internally to look at what is our existing demand now, what is our built-out capacity, and what are the constraints that the district has put onto us. And we can provide that information to you and as a follow-up. But I would say, while that is going, I think it's comforting to know that the utility department, which has been well-run and which has the fiduciary responsibility to expend its dollars wisely, has the ability to provide the potable water for its citizens in the immediate future and through the 2030 comp plan as well. But we can still look at the alternative water supplies that we'd be looking at, which is anywhere from 6 to 10-year process in and of itself, to begin that phase while relying on the existing Upper Meridian water, but looking at other ways to pursue alternative water supplies that may exist right now. So we can provide, just in the short term, at least the capacity analysis that we have that says that we have stuff. I also want to note as well, in the 2007 study, CDM was expecting that the population would be in 2017 what it is right now, about 140,000 residents in Indian River County. However, it was noted that there would be about a 12.5 MGD use at that point in time. With the population, happy to say that either our consumers are getting smarter or our conservative tier structure is in place. Our average daily demand is less than 9 million gallons a day. It's about 8.5 to 8.7 million gallons a day. So while our population has increased in line with the Beaver estimates, our consumptive use has actually decreased. So in that regards, we can look at ways of not only looking at alternative water supplies, but enhancing and educating our consumers as well as part of this process that we go through.
So we're good through the population estimate in the comp plan through 2035, but if you throw in the lower consumption rate that the other plan was taking into consideration, does that move 2035 further out based on
It could expand that out, but again, we have a 20-year consumptive use permit that expires in 2030, and we're good for a consumptive use at that point. But at 2021, it caps out as far as it plateaus the allowable withdrawal that the district will allow us to do. And they then have to actually reanalyze some of their demands that they've been allowed to write permits for as well. So during this process, they're looking at updating the water supply plan. They're also updating their records as to what is actually being produced and what's actually being consumed on a daily basis, not only for this county, but the counties in Region 4 and other parts of the district as well. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is, studies are great, but I think they have to, like the impact fee studies, be looked at every so often to make sure that they're staying on target.
Right. Okay.
Commissioner Davis, did you have a comment? Or?
Well, I'm just trying to think. The one thing that I think that has kind of changed in this since our last discussion has clearly been the amount of water that we're trying to keep from going into the lagoon, or specifically even the quality of water. I don't want to say, because the lagoon needs a lot of fresh water for it to have the healthy environment there. And I think that a lot of times people misinterpret runoff with not clean runoff. And so, but with that said, and that dynamic shift to a certain extent, it's almost like now with the alternative water supply, it's clearly going to be stopping some runoff. And once we get the runoff stored, then we can continue the sheet flow, and all those calculations are going to have to be a part of what we do here in the future. in addition to, I've always envisioned having a water source always utilized for three different purposes. One is human consumption, one is for recreational purposes, and the other is for agricultural purposes. And of course, the quality of all three of those differ for what you need it for. But if I don't know how, I don't remember all about the 2007 study, but if it did take that into account or not, we might need to go back and just revisit that study to a certain extent to add that portion of it back.
That portion you're talking about should be part of how that surface water supply is actually utilized, or how our total water supply is actually utilized over time.
Right.
I mean, I think if we can, right now, a lot of agricultural units draw straight out of the aquifer, and they're in the deep Floridian aquifer, and if we can provide an alternative source for those people using it for agriculture, then we put a lot less stress on the aquifer, which is then available for human consumption. So I think that the more alternatives we have to supply water, the better we'll be able to utilize them however they're utilized.
Vinny, the one question I have is when you talk about permitted capacity, is that the same as actual gallons of water in the ground, or is there a difference?
I think there's a difference. It just means what we as utilities in our charge, which is to provide clean drinking potable water to our users, are allowed to withdraw from the certain source that we currently draw, and that's the Upper Floridian Aquifer at this point. It may mean that there might be some other users into that system that are also affecting the capacity and the finite resources that are there. But at the end of the day, we have to abide by the consumptive use permit, which was currently, I think, renewed in 2011, is good for 20 years at this point.
Right. But again, to me, the question is, or I guess, if the water is available, we're allowed to draw it for our permitted capacity.
Yes.
But we don't have a guarantee that water will be there for us to draw it up.
That's correct. I think it's a pretty dynamic environment as well. There's a lot of different factors that go into that availability, as well as the modeling that the district has done with Mr. Toth in the past to look at what amount of water is available so that the district can write those permits for the allowable withdrawal rates.
Right. And I just brought that up just to make sure we're not too complacent just because we have permitted capacity thinking, okay, all of our water issues are solved, that it really does depend on the actual water supply being there for us to draw it up. So, any other questions, Vinny?
One other one. I did, back before Christmas, on another matter, I reached out to Dr. Andrew O'Reilly of the USGS, who really kind of gave me the Cliff Note version of the aquifer system and how it operates and how it moves, and it was, a lot of it was, I'd say, over my head on the realm he was speaking in, but very interesting people. I don't know who else we reach out to for this data, but he's the staff contact for USGS that basically keeps track of underground what's under our county, and he was just a unlimited resource of data and information that I found a lot of it pretty fascinating, is kind of not looking that far underground in the county before, but I think knowing what gap we might be targeting trying to fill depicts on how big a surface water supply plan should be as you're looking going forward, and how far do you project out? Do you go to, I don't want to use the word 50 years, tying that back to another plan that has 50 years tied to it, but what's the forecasting horizon? How far do you go out? Should you go out? And 20 years from now, desal may be as simple as, now it's very complicated, very expensive. Tampa Bay's had a bad, they're operating at about 50% capacity and 100% over budget. Not a good system we want to go into, but in 20 years that could change to something that works at half the price. There's no way to say what the future holds. Also, I look at how much water we expel out through the canal systems as a way of, I don't want to say scrubbing it in place, cleaning it, and designating it for a higher reuse amount to take the dependency off potable and shifting it more to reuse when that's possible. But that then involves a piping network that you have to have. You can have reuse water, but you got to be able to get it to the customer to where they need it at. But just trying to think creatively and out of the box, and being on the St. Johns River Alliance. Thank you, Peter. It's a great drive up to see those folks, and there's a variety of personalities at the tables, from I don't want to say from the tree hugger left to the conservative right in the terms of water issues in Florida, and it's a pretty dynamic group. They seem to get along, and they sit very close at the table, all within arm's reach of each other. So if they didn't get along, I think they'd be spread out a little. There are people that seem to purposely sit opposing each other based on some of the barbs that were thrown across the table. But a pretty friendly group, but all with the goal of how do you deal with the future water needs for Florida. And the program next week, talking about the 155 million gallon future limit, I think will evaporate in no time. And they didn't seem to think so, but I said, well, as soon as you limit something like capacity on a roadway, it's amazing how it goes away, and it's gone. So they have no plans of limiting applications and other things that I said they probably should have a plan for somebody, I don't want to say stockpiling water capacity permits for something, but as soon as you limit it, it becomes kind of an underground traded commodity of sorts of I have a permit and you don't. So whatever that guy has is now worth more than what the guy that doesn't have a permit. So, but that's drifting off. But I think trying to define the void that we would be trying to fill would be an important part to know how big a scope of a project that you would be necessarily looking at in a long roundabout way.
Thank you.
Just so I'm clear on the direction of the board, what is it that you're actually looking for as part of this feasibility study that will help us staff to craft a scope of work that we can use?
Vinny, why don't we wait here, see if there's anyone from the audience, and then we can get back to you and give you a final summation. So, is there anyone that wishes to speak? Good morning, and name and record, please. Bob?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Robert Adair. I reside at 7060 33rd Street. I'm a member of your Agriculture Advisory Committee and also serve as a supervisor for the Soil and Water Conservation District, and thank you for letting me speak to you this morning on this very important subject. I think Commissioner Solari is right on task. My presence here today is to amplify what he's saying. He did originally say that he was looking at potable water. I would like to add that it's equally important to that would be the agricultural use of water for some sort of storage of our surface water, which most is going to tide right now. And I'd also like to point out that there's two ways that you can store that water. One is on the surface, and the other is storage and aquifer recovery, which is new. It's very trendy. It has been done in Brevard County with some success, and that's something that we should look at. But what I want to tell you is there's a pending concern with the use of the Florida aquifer in our county. Our county came in for these consumptive use permits after agricultural permits that have existed from the 40s and earlier. There's something like 1,500 permitted artesian wells in our county that are prior to the county's permit that have right to that water prior to the county. That is according to Florida water law. There has been a drawdown ascribed to the county's withdrawals. Right now we're in a situation where that's not a huge thing per se. The problem is that our agricultural use of that artesian water east of I-95, west of 60, has largely been abandoned in terms of citrus and other agricultural. But I want to advise you that it's essential for agricultural use of that land outside your urban service area to have a water supply. If that water supply is threatened, you remove agriculture from the equation and you put pressure on your urban service area. What are you going to do with that land? What's the use? So this land is agricultural in use. It does need the water, and the demands on the Florida aquifer north of our county have increased, within our county have increased, and so we have a festering sub rosa or underground subterra problem that's looming if a cure for greening were discovered, or if a new alternative crop were to be planted in this area and those wells were to then be opened up. So I wanted to point that out to you, and I also wanted to point out to you the importance of going to this meeting on the 10th with the water supply plan for the district. And the district is using these numbers, and these numbers are based on our current population and our current agricultural use. And I'm just telling you that agriculture is in a period of damage due to this disease with this large abandonment. A couple things. I think it would be very important for staff to look at that. Both the Agriculture Advisory Committee and Soil and Water Conservation District has advised the county to look for an alternative water supply. It's been on the back burner now for almost 7 years. You were talking about your budget and your amortization and your cost of return. That's an investment that right now, with property values being down, if you were to acquire land or lease land, those would be under very favorable rates. So I encourage you strongly to support Commissioner Solari's use with the addition of that water purpose to be used for agricultural uses also. And if there's any questions I can help you with, I'd be happy to do that.
Can we use it for recreational purposes also?
I think that's a possibility. It should be looked into, because when you contain water, you open it up for especially agricultural water. That's a possibility, and that should be looked at. I guess I'd like to add another thing, is that one of the concerns we have with these 1,500 wells that I think needs to be brought up at this meeting is the fact that these wells are 60 years old and older, and the casings, a large number of them, are leaking. We don't know how many. We've asked for a hydrological study from the USGS, the person you were talking to. I think if we did that study, it wouldn't cost that much. On a representative sample number of wells, we could determine what the impact is and what the cost would be. The district, St. John's Water Management District, has abandoned their abandoned well program, which is a huge mistake, and it's particularly problematic for Indian River County. Secondly, reinstituting well plugging could save a lot of this silent cancer-like leak into our surface aquifer, salinization, water from 120 feet up to the surface. And then lastly, the idea of conservation. We've recommended a mobile irrigation laboratory to help people with their irrigation systems, to calibrate them, to get their pan evaporators calibrated right so the system's not running when it's raining and that type of thing. That around the state has achieved a lot of water savings. So conservation's huge, reuse water is good, the hydrological study, and the well plugging program. I suggest Commissioner support. You talked about lobbying. Let the district know we need funds for this well plugging program, and we need them now.
How many people are saying, man, I'd plug this well if there was just some cost sharing?
It's very expensive to plug the well. Right now is a challenging time for agricultural people with their costs. Costs of production are double what they were a few years ago. I think we're going to need district funding, possibly county funding, and possibly landowner to share in some sort of cost share.
I'm with you on that, but do we have a list of wells that need to be plugged right now, Bob?
Well, see, that's the deal. That's where you need to study. If the well's abandoned and not being used, it needs to be plugged. If it's being actively used and it's leaking, it needs to be repaired. You pretty much got two choices. The question is how many of those that are being actively used or just sitting there are actually leaking. And that's where you can do the study. They can put fiber optics down and actually see where the leaks are. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, but I don't want to turn a program into a condominium association where we start going out on somebody's property and saying, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you with your well. But at the same time, if there is a situation where there's one broke, somebody says, I really would like to fix it, because I don't have the money to put into it, there's enough public benefit of doing that I would be willing to try to do it, to make it work. My question is do we have a list? Is there people out there that are that way, or that need some help plugging their wells?
The SWCD board, which has individuals that have actually installed these wells, their expert opinion is there's a significant number of wells that are leaking. How much that costs, I know it's expensive. I can't give you the numbers. The district had a program. They had the equipment and the concrete pumps to do that. I've seen the process. It entails pumping concrete down into the well 500 feet deep, and depending upon the diameter of those wells. But I'm telling you that if those wells are reactivated, that you're going to have a major problem. And if you have a freeze event, your loss of potentiometric flow, the ability for that water to flow at the surface, will not occur, and those are self-supply pumps that require positive flow. The county has submersible pumps. County's okay. The only problem with the county is if they cause adverse impact, you will have to supply water to those wells outside the urban service area, potable water, possibly agricultural use water, to that user. That effectively opens up your urban service area boundary, at least for water.
I guess in the event that y'all do come across one that somebody says, hey, I need some help plugging this well, let me know. And we'll bring it through the Ag Advisory Committee and bring it for this board and see what we can do about getting them plugged.
I think there probably was a list at one time, but when the district unfunded the program, nobody kept, at least from what I found, if somebody said, hey, there's a list you could get on to get your well plugged for free, you'd start accumulating a list, I think, fairly easily.
When you apply for your consumptive use permit, you agree to maintain that well. The fact of the matter is it's under the table. It's sub terra. They don't know it's leaking.
Right.
And we don't know. When you see it at the surface, it's a mess. It's pretty hard to fix an artesian well because you've got positive pressure and you're digging a pit and you're pumping it. That technology all exists. So the repairs are expensive and the cost of plugging is expensive, but the cost of doing nothing would be a disaster. So you're pretty much forced to look at this repair plugging program, and you're pretty much, we have to look at an alternative water supply for our county for ag. The salinization that's occurring is making that water unfit for irrigation.
Just a general question that maybe you can answer. I know when I drive out to Tampa or to Yeehaw to get on the turnpike, there's those tens of thousands of acres of water stored through, I guess, depending on what side of 60 you're on, who that water belongs to. Mm-hmm. What's the long-term purpose of that stored water? I'm fine for storing water, but I don't want to store water if somebody else is storing water that you might be able to use that currently stored water.
There's no dispute over who owns the water. The state does.
Okay.
They've already answered that for us. But basically what you have out there is you've got a reservoir of the St. John's Water Control District, not the improvement district, or not the St. John's Improvement District, not the one in Palatka.
Right, okay.
You've got Bob Ulovich fiefdom.
Oh,
and then,
okay.
The water north of 60 is the upper St. John's.
Right.
Literally, that water is going into the river to Jacksonville, to tide, and you have straws all the way up north to the river from Melbourne, tapping into that water ultimately at Jacksonville. The citrus growers are looking at water farming west of 95. This huge area of concern that I'm talking about is primarily east of 95.
Which is where we have probably most of our stormwater issues, where you combine.
We have enough water. It's how we manage it.
Well, yeah, a lot of it.
And how do we pay?
It's like 2.5 billion gallons a day goes out to tide in Jacksonville. It's,
which they're going to keep. You're going to have minimum sheet flows. They're not going to let you just start holding it all back and not letting it flow.
Oh, true. You need a certain amount, but do you need 2.5 billion gallons a day?
Right.
Going out to the ocean.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Good morning.
My name is Deborah Ecker. I live at 550 Riamar Drive in Vero Beach. I'm speaking on behalf of the Indian River Neighborhood Association. Our organization supports Commissioner Solari's proposal to direct staff to develop a feasibility study to develop a fresh surface water system with a reservoir and a request for funding from the St. John's River Water Management District. The only addition that we would propose to add to Commissioner Solari's request is that the feasibility study be directed to a fully designed long-term water reservoir, a system that can provide only short-term water retention, not directly available for drinking water, will not meet this country's needs. And now I'm going to speak a little further. I'm going to give perhaps a little bit more of a pitch than a simple request for a feasibility study generally requires. And this is because more than 5 years ago, it was when I learned about the probable shortfall in the county's drinking water and the problem with the lack of traditional resources like drilling another deep well. So it was with pleasure that I saw that today's agenda included Commissioner Solari's proposal so I would have a chance to address this issue. As you have announced earlier, the St. Johns River Water Management District is currently going through the process of holding hearings on its most recent study. In advance, the agency distributed statistics relevant to our county's projected water demands. And I have done a couple of simple slides here, which this gentleman is going to be kind enough to put up. Oh, one is already up. Well, it didn't come across very big, did it? So, okay, I don't know if you can even read it, but you can see those. Oh, thank you. This shows the Indian River County water demand projections according to the St. Johns River Water Management District in its most recent report that just came out. And you can see the growth in those blue lines, even if you can't see the numbers, between 2010, or really where we are now, 2015 to 2035. Then there's another one in which I have a percentage change. What do I do about that? Oh, I changed it here? Thank you. Of course, these percentages can be a little bit deceiving, but it was interesting to me when I converted these to percentages that the greatest growth was right now in this 2015 to 2020 period. So that leads to my essentially my conclusion, which is that we really need to get underway on this study. But before I say that, I want to add a couple more comments, and that is that that's the end of my slides, and thank you very much for being available to show them. The county is fortunate to have a potential drinking water resource, one that we're not tapping. The Vero Beach Airport is one of 281 locations in the United States where there have been rain records that have been kept for close to 60 years, maybe more. And this monitoring station shows that we have been among the top 16 locations in the continental United States with the heaviest rainfall. We're fortunate, but we've been wasteful. We allow this rainfall, this storm water, to flow in the millions of gallons directly into the lagoon. Commissioner Solari's suggestion that funds from the district. Now I'm going to go to another point, which was when I closely read at least the summary portions of the report, is that among the district's commitments is to helping the counties is that it will be available to provide water supply development project assistance. So there may be some actual practical reality in asking for funds, some study funds. And just to conclude, I will say that to prepare for this county's anticipated population increase, there should be no delay in the counties coming up with a plan for an alternative water resource. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ecker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else that wishes to speak?
Oh, I'm sorry, we'll do it after.
Yes, sir, come on up. Althea, just come up, we'll be next. Yep. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Lex Crumhout, Vero Beach, Florida. I've lived here for 65 years, and I've watched this county change. I've seen this issue of water supply become a growing issue. I've served on the Soil Conservation Board, and I resigned from it out of frustration out of this to get this matter on the table to deal with it. Mr. Solari, I commend you for it. However, I would like to stress some concerns that I have. One, the county utilities well field on 77th Avenue, I believe it is, if it goes to full production on all 9 wells there, the cone of influence will be tremendous. It goes all the way down to State Road 60, west of 95, and affects all the artesian wells in that area. That's a huge cone of influence. There's several other things you need to take note to. The well fields in the South County are pretty much tapped out. St. Lucie County is objecting to any additional production there. So you've got a problem, as well as the issues of who's sucking out of the aquifer north of us, because that's where the water comes from. Other things you need to look out for. One, surface water management or surface reservoirs is a good idea. However, what's going to get back into the ground is somewhat limited because of the soil types that we have in this county. You have marl, you have hardpan, which pretty much limits downward flow. You do have upward flow when you create a surface reservoir. I know because I'm one of these property owners west of Route 6, west of town on Route 60, who had a on-site surface retention reservoir. You lose an awful lot to evaporation. There is no way to stop that. A reservoir or a pond or whatever, in effect, becomes a pump in dry weather and hot weather. It draws water out of the ground, and you lose the benefits of the reservoir at the time that you need it the very most. So it's something you need to look out for in dealing with these issues. I just wanted to add these comments to you because you're on the right track. We've got a problem coming in this county. We've got to deal with it because if these growth projections continue, it's going to hit us between the eyes and we're not going to be able to cope with it at the very worst possible time. So again, I appreciate you looking into this. I hope you move forward, but there is an awful lot to consider and be on guard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Ms. McKenzie?
Yeah, I just had a few questions. I'm very familiar with reservoirs. Actually, where I grew up, we relied completely on a reservoir for our production, our water use. But what happens with the reservoir, as the gentleman said, is that your water levels go down, and we ended up having to have what we call water restrictions, something that people here probably wouldn't know about. But we would literally get to the point where you could only turn water on for an hour a day for potable water. So my question is twofolded. Is there a possibility to use the Indian River Lagoon? It's a saline estuary. Can that be somehow turned into agricultural water? Is that a possibility? I see Commissioner Davis.
You can use that for just about any kind of water, but it's got to be treated. And it boils down to, we don't have a water shortage. We've got a cheap water shortage perhaps coming one day. There's a lot of water to the east. It's just going to be difficult to turn it into potable water. And so that's really what we're looking at right now. The cheapest method that we've had for the best quality for the longest period of time has been the Floridian aquifer, and we're tapping into that and we're utilizing that. And the next step, from what I gather, the drinking water quality for surface water is not as good as the Floridian aquifer, and there's some additional treatments that must be done, as well as some security issues. You're basically exposing a body of water that you're going to drink to, the sky. And so, to answer your question on all that, any of the water can be drinkable, can be used for agricultural purposes. It's just how much money do you want to pay to have it put in and pumped in a quality and location to be able to be used for that.
Okay, because a couple of years ago there was some discussion, and a lot of people actually chuckled at the idea. But I believe Ms. Honey Manuse had this short campaign about rain barrels. And I know there's a short project about that in Indian River Mall, but if we're looking at individual homes having a shortage of water, that's not a bad thing to look at, again, just for long-term purposes and individual reserves. And then is there a possibility to build a reservoir that's actually contained? In other words, can you direct that water into contained tanks that you could use at a later date? Because the rainwater is just being washed into the lagoon. Is that what everyone's saying?
Yes.
That we don't capture that storm water in any capacity right now?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's a lot of government incentives for super green type living, futuristic type things where people are capturing waters is that something that we will start exploring as, futuristic for this area? Because not only is our water supply going to diminish, but when Broward County and Miami, they're looking at projections of being higher in population than New York City in about 10 years, is what the reports are saying. We're definitely going to be caught in the middle between a lot of metropolitan areas and not have what we need. So I like the ideas and the discussions, and I would really encourage a reservoir, having experience with a reservoir. And what we did with our reservoir is that we tried to lead small river streams into that reservoir so it had a significant supply at all times. But it is limited. It can run out, and then it causes water shortages if you make that just one main source.
And that's what ours is kind of the exact opposite almost, but that's the same concept of what we're talking about with the if you put a reservoir there, instead of we obviously don't have a valley to plug at one end just to keep a large reservoir like they would up in Tennessee mountain somewhere. But what we're doing is, instead of having rivers run into this area, we're taking our canals and probably going to have it go uphill into some kind of a storage.
And then flow back to the county.
Piped. It'll be pumped probably from that point. Pumped in, stored, and instead of it all going, when we get like 3 inches of rain, we'll pump it up, store it up, and once we get all we can hold, then that's whenever we'd probably quit pumping.
And if we are the top, because one of the things we discussed in upstate New York is fresh water supply, and Saratoga started selling their water. It was interesting because there wasn't any water there. But if we have the potential to have this large amount of rainfall, maybe look at it as a revenue source. Maybe we can start, maybe 10 years from now, selling it to other areas, not just look at what Indian River County needs, but what are the needs surrounding us, so that we can look at this as some type of capital revenue for the future. That was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? Okay. Commissioner Slory, would you just like to kind of summarize the direction you'd like to see staff to take, and form that in the frame that in the form of a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the staff look at the conclusions of the 2007 alternative water supply study, which suggests that we ought to have a surface water supply for the future. It notes that this will probably include a new reservoir, so some of the things that need to be looked at would be the ownership of the reservoir, the cost of the land, and how the costs would be financed and addressed. We also need to be wide open in how we looked at it. I didn't mean to give the idea that this was just for potable water at all. I mean, for me, water's basically, to some degrees, fungible. We have aquifer water and we have surface water. At the end of the day, we want to use all that water in the best possible ways. But I would think that staff ought to try to look out to see what a couple other similar surface water projects have done and get as much information as they can there. That the staff ought to, as soon as possible, enter into a dialogue with the St. Johns River Water Management District to get whatever the initial expertise they can offer and direction they might be able to offer, and that we are certainly looking at the end of the day, designing a fully designed long-term system. I think that the conversation needs to include talking with people like Bob Ulovich from the San Sebastian Improvement District and the St. John's Improvement District, but particularly the San Sebastian District, because I think that is probably, at the end of the day, where a good-sized reservoir would best be located. That's not only in an area where there are a lot of existing canals, not just with the Indian River Farms District, but the Sebastian Improvement District. And the Sebastian Improvement District also sends a lot of water out to the Sebastian River and then out to tide. So I would hope that that would be enough to form the motion and give enough direction to the utility staff to get started.
Second.
I already did that. You could third it if you want.
Vinny, is that good?
Yes, Chairman. Just for the record again, Vincent Burke, probably going to kick myself in the butt for saying this, but I'd also like to have the commissioners take a look at the total amount of water that's used. In the 2010 Appendix A, there's about 175 million gallons used, and of that, only 16.7 million, per the Debbie Ecker, was used for potable consumption. So if you look at the percentage of the water that was used, and I recognize the comments from Mr. Adair and from the other folks that are agricultural supported, you have to look at the total amount of what was used for potable, and that's less than 10% of the total water that was used in Indian River County. That could be accounted for. A lot of these wells are older wells. Mr. Adair quite rightly states some of the water uses that were in place before the utilities got there. But I just want to set the mindset that as well that while the county is trying to go out to provide the potable water, we represent less than 10% of the total usage in the county at this time.
I think what we can look municipalities or just the fact that
and that's including City of Vero Beach, Indian River County, and Fellsmere. So if you look at just Indian River County, you're probably looking at about 5%.
Okay, so that's
for all of the municipalities that provide water.
I think we can look at our own utility needs and alternatives. What we may want to do is go to St. John's, maybe partner with them to look at the other water needs in this district. They have Grantsville, see if they're willing to fund it, and we could match fund it either through utilities or the general fund. But I think they've got a lot of data, and meet with them. I think we're going to have to kind of have a phased approach.
Yeah, they're our permitting agency for water, so I mean, we're not going to be able to do this without them.
There are two or three other things. One is that I think that the plugging of the wells is something we're going to have to look at, and I think that St. John's will be revisiting it, but I think that's going to have to be a separate proposal to follow up on Mr. Adair's idea of actually having a well study done. I think that's probably something we'll have to do in the near future. That needs to be done. But we also have the fact that this is the type of thing which could help with the TMDL remediation. I mean, clearly, if we're using it, half the benefit will be for TMDL remediation, and that's a big plus. But I think that overall, this might be a very good time to follow up on Mr. Burke's request that we look at the wider use of the water, because again, it is fungible. I mean, what we want is not just a good potable water supply for the people in the urban service district, but we want to make sure that the water resource is properly planned and utilized for the benefit of everybody in Indian River County at the end of the day.
And Sarasota County has done something similar to this, except they were trying to at least do the wetland restoration and the aquifer recharge initially with potable water coming downstream after the fact. So that's a 10-year process that they've gone through that's partnered with the district to look at some of those studies in order to create a reservoir type of system. So we're going to look into that as well and bring some of those.
Maybe we should ask St. John's to do a presentation in front of us on this subject and the well problems first, and see what information they have. And do you think that would be a good idea as a commission?
Well, not first. I think we need to do them simultaneously. I mean, we have more than one track to go down at this time, and we're going to need to get this. I believe we need to get the alternative water, the surface water supply study, feasibility study.
Oh no, we could do them in parallel. I mean,
we can absolutely do them in parallel.
And I think somewhere that you have to factor in that you can't cut off all water supply. There's a determined amount that has to continue to. It's all part of the big picture.
Absolutely, but remembering that with the three farms. Canals, the basin is 51,000 acres when initially it was 17,000 acres, and initially there was no conveyance system. So the amount of water that would have gone through would have been, I think, 1 or 2 or 3%. It's only less than 10%. So moving the portion that we can back to the west is not going to be, I don't think, detrimental to the flow into the lagoon.
It could. I mean, nobody's told me how much fresh water should flow into the lagoon.
No, but again, naturally, I think that would amount. Right now, it's about 100 million gallons a day, and I don't think nature would have had it. Nature, I think, would have had it as less than 10 million gallons a day. And realistically, we're not going to get a huge portion of the water from the three relief canals flowing west. We might get, at the end of the day, 20-30% of it. I wouldn't imagine an amount much more than that at the end of the day.
Would just caution to keep in mind when you're going back in time, the sheet flow, that was also pre-inlets. And so there'd be a less need for the fresh water. Now that we've got billions of salt water coming in, the need for fresh water is higher. So,
very good point.
And I agree with Commissioner Davis. No one's given me that minimum flow to the lagoon yet. And I have that a big concern. with the Water Management District when they keep letting people take straws out of the fresh water. You know, the lagoon needs that flow of clean fresh water at a steady pace, and they have yet to give me that number, and I think we need to just be cognizant of that is a need there.
Mm-hmm. The trick is just getting it clean enough when we discharge it into the lagoon.
I think it can take a lot of fresh water. I mean, just having it clean is where the issue is.
Right.
I mean.
So, Vinny, did we clarify anything, or are you still confused?
Yeah, no, you did. I think you gave me some clear direction. I think there's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of players involved, and it's just our efforts to at least look at the feasibility and chop up some of these things into smaller, manageable pieces that we can look at.
And throw in reuse, too.
Well, it's all part of the consumption puzzle.
And Commissioner Sawyer, your motion is to have this back before us next week. Is that?
I was thinking Wednesday.
What about this afternoon?
There you go.
All right. So we do have a motion from Commissioner Solari, second by Commissioner Fleischer, to have staff look into the surface water supply and some additional things. Any further discussion?
This is
that's as clear as I can make it. I'm sorry.
I totally understand. I heard a well-placed motion by Commissioner Solari and seconded, but just afterward, Vinnie Burke had requested the additional total water used analysis. Was that to be part of that issue?
Yeah, I think that would be a natural part of it from the start.
Perfect.
And one last question. This basically kind of goes along with the presentation that you've made a few times on reversing a portion of the water that's going east.
Yeah, I think this to me is something like the Spoonville Marsh. I mean, the Spoonville Marsh was done initially to address the brine situation from the water plants, but it turned out that it was a great thing for TMDL remediation. Mm-hmm. So I think at the end of the day, we'll be taking advantage of whatever possible TMDL remediation possibilities the plant does. I mean, the water has to be cleaned up anyway before it's used. So part of it.
At one of the presentations, you had kind of a budget number that it could range, and it was from low end to high end, but it had a big. The low end was a big
total TMDL remediation.
Okay.
And this would be something less than that, I think.
Okay.
I'm kind of sorry we woke these two up. Man.
Yeah, really. Hey, look what you get. Weird as
that'll teach you.
Notice how the early part of the meeting was rolling, pointing that out.
Very orderly, quickly.
We have hopefully a clarified motion and a second. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Commissioner Solari, your second item, the United States Prescription Discount Cards, memorandum dated January 27, 2014. Commissioner Solari.
I really believe that this one will be fast. This one,
everybody's leaving.
in the mail was a USPD prescription savings card, and when I read it all, I couldn't understand what the benefit would actually be to me, the consumer. And basically they're saying that, use our prescription discounts card. The card entitles you to reduced prices on all your prescription medications at pharmacies everywhere nationwide. Now, it sounds like a fine, good thing, but looking into it, at the end of the day, I couldn't see really what the benefit to our citizens would be. Now, I don't want to suggest that they're doing anything illegal. They're not. But it appears that there's little benefit for our residents. The purpose of this whole thing, after looking at some internet articles, seems to be this group collecting information which they will then sell to third parties. And I have just a fear that the Affordable Health Care Act, which has a lot of moving parts and a lot of confusion to it right now, that people are going to come out to try to say that they're trying to help you maneuver through the Affordable Care Act and different health care systems, but at the end of the day, basically be trying to get your information or scam you in other ways. So basically, I just want to say to every citizen here, just please be careful with these things that come in the mail that look really good, but may not benefit you. I think that a lot of people are going to be basically trying to get into your pocketbook or trying to get your personal information and use it for their benefit and not yours. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Commissioner, sorry, just to follow up, I want people to know that the county, we do have the county prescription discount card that we get through our association with the National Association of Counties. We've had that for 5 or 6 years now. It's been very successful. It is for the underinsured and uninsured, and I'll have Brad Bernhauer send you the information on that, how many people have used it, and the dollar savings to our county residents. But that prescription card has been beneficial to our residents, and I just don't want people to get scared off not to.
People are going to try to take advantage of the good things we're doing or prescription cards doing to try to leverage other not so good things.
Yep. Okay. Gentlemen? Seeing no further items on the agenda and no further discussion, we are now adjourned. Point